I don't really know if you need me for this one. And
what
honestly,
are you talking about?
No, because I really just want to go watch the Letterkenny special that came out yesterday that I haven't had time to watch yet. So I don't even know why I'm here right now.
Are you like in denial about the announcements or something?
We'll find out. So here's the thing.
Oh my God.
I'm going to do that thing where I'm not going to tell you whether or not I bought anything until later on in the episode. So you have to listen. Although I will also say that my brand is very strong. My brand is very strong because I got a lot of tweets with people saying with questionable amounts of sarcasm, like, oh gosh, are we going to have to listen to Casey plug membership 85 times this week? The answer is probably. And I'm a little concerned that this is my brand now. He's just shilling for our own membership, but that's okay. So we have anything to talk about this week?
No, there's
nothing at all.
Nothing really happened, did it?
No, nothing at all. This was a big week. My goodness.
Oh, wow.
So we can start with standard ATP fare. We should talk fashion.
Have you bought any new watch bands from the spring collection?
Is there actually, all kidding aside, is there a new spring collection? Because I missed it. If so, oh really? I honestly didn't realize.
Yeah, this is one of those things. Like in recent years, like not just recent years. Apple has for a long time now debuted new like Apple Watch bands and iPhone cases. Usually at least once or twice outside of the usual fall events.
Yeah.
And usually there's a spring collection, and there is indeed a spring collection. You got to get a nice new yellow and a new orange, and I think a new green, maybe. But yeah, anyway, that's the spring collection. Are you talking about the green phone though? Is that what we're talking about?
No, actually, not even that.
I wonder if the watch bands are going to be like, I was going to say like Beanie Babies, but like, because they do that thing where they introduce them, in spring and fall. But the other part of that is that they go away. Like, so if there's one particular shade of like purple that you really liked, but they only sold it like 3 years ago in the fall, you may never see that again. So I wonder if someone's just like collecting them all, and like at the end of this, we'll just have like the ultimate collection of Apple Watch bands. I have all the colors. It's impossible to get them.
So I know that this was a thing, that the watch band collections was a thing, but I had no idea that they actually really did do a new one.
Wait, something's okay. I might freak out for a moment here. The white sport band is gone.
That's what I'm telling you. They go away.
The white sport band though, that's always there. That's my band. What?
The white band is your band? What did it just happen to you, Marco?
It was Johnny Ives' band too, right?
I mean, I guess he's gone. And honestly, looking at this event, good riddance.
Oh my word!
I guess we'll get to that. Oh man, what am I gonna wear? I guess I'll have to switch to like lemon zest or something.
So you're gonna become like me. You're gonna stock up on them like cheese graters. You have in the basement, just 50 white watch bands.
Starlight just looks dirty. Mm-hmm.
Dishwater, they call it.
Yes, dishwater white. Which honestly, the white band does get dirty easily, but I just I clean it. It's fine.
All right, so for the record, listeners, before we started recording,
I knew you were going to bring this up.
before we did anything, John's this was, as long as we don't get mired down in the early stuff,
I think I said
we'll go real fast. Sidetracked, whatever. As long as we don't get sidetracked.
Why would we get sidetracked?
I will take the blame for this one. We are on line one of the notes, and we
haven't even gotten to line one. We have gotten to Apple event. That is literally the only thing that we've gotten to.
I mean, like line one. Yeah, that's the heading, the first body line. All right, go ahead, Casey.
Okay. So the fashion I was trying to talk about before we went down this rabbit hole is astute individuals, of which I was not one of them, noticed Tim's combination of shirt color and watch band, and I'm going to choose to believe this was deliberate, and I'm here for it. He had a very lovely blue shirt and a very yellow watch band. What could that possibly indicate?
He could just like lemon zest, which is the color that he was wearing. However, yeah, it's definitely a Ukraine thing. Absolutely.
Although it is interesting that like. So he has this idea. I should wear colors for solidarity with Ukraine. Great, right? So he goes to his wardrobe and he's like, well, I've got the yellow watch band. That's part of the new spring line. I've got to get a blue shirt. But I guess his closet simply doesn't contain any shirts that are close to the color blue on the flag of Ukraine. He just has like a tasteful, like Tim Cook kind of blue. And so that's what he wore. Like, he couldn't bring himself to wear like the actual colors because it would just not be appropriate for Tim Cook. So
Well, and I think there's a limit of how much excitement Tim Cook can display, and I think the yellow wristband that's his limit. Like
it's very exuberant. Yeah.
Yes, that's as exuberant as he can be.
Indeed. All right. So in the attempt to move it right along, Apple starts announcing things. They start with a recap of some of the things. Not even a recap. It's both a recap and a preview of some of their featured films. Most of which actually I was not aware of. There's apparently a new animated series, or excuse me, not animated series, but animated film. Lucky, I think, is the name of it. And
I think it's called Luck, right?
Oh, was it Luck? Okay.
Maybe getting confused with the David Milch show about horse racing, maybe?
Yeah, let's go with that. And so as per Upgrade this week, I believe that this is is it Tim Lester? No, John Lasseter's. John Lasseter's new place that's doing that. There's a spy movie of some sort with the dude from Witcher, Henry Cavill. There's all sorts of different stuff that's coming, some of which looked really, really good. And then Apple announced that Friday Night Baseball is coming to Apple TV Plus if baseball ever comes back. So 2 episodes every Friday night. It will be available on Apple TV Plus and for a limited time without the need of a subscription. And there's a post from friend of the show, Jason Snell, and also a huge baseball fan about this, which we will put in the show notes.
Wait, hold on. Honest question. Is baseball not back? I have no idea.
No.
Really?
No. So there's supposed to... I probably know the most of the three of us about this, and I know very, very, very little. So
They're
take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt. But my limited understanding
Welcome to the show. You know as much about sports as we know about a lot of the stuff we talk about.
Right? So it is supposed to have been back, but the owners and the players are bickering over the owners not thinking they're rich enough and the players feeling like they deserve a small cut of the ridiculous riches that the owners have. And so Jason apparently is listening live and is correcting me already. He said it's an owner lockout. So the owners are refusing to, if I understand it right, let any of the games happen because they're greedy jerks. And so there's no baseball yet. In fact, I believe breaking news just before we recorded, I believe they have announced another couple of weeks delay in the season or something like that. So yeah, it's kind of ugly and an interesting time for Apple to announce that they're getting Friday Night Baseball, assuming it ever comes back.
Yeah, you should read that post because even if you don't care about baseball, because it talks more about streaming services and how that intersects with the way sports has traditionally been funded and viewed by sports fans. So even if you're not into sports, you might be interested in that because it's all of our future. We're not going to get into now because we're not getting sidetracked, right? Casey, next item.
That's right. Moving right along.
Speaking of disputes, I have no ferry service right now because of a dispute.
I know, we heard.
Did we hear? I didn't hear this.
Yeah, a couple shows back, he said they're going to stop ferry service.
Oh, yeah. And they did.
No one thought they would actually do it. They did it starting yesterday, so we have no ferry service. Yay.
If only you had a vehicle you could drive on the sand and go somewhere.
You're just going to make them buy a boat. Stop.
Everyone's boats are still, in the marshmallow wrap.
You get one of those off-road vehicles that turns into a boat, a duck boat or whatever.
Oh, don't even tease. Or what was it, a Gibbs Aquatica? Oh, man.
Duck boat would fit under your house. Take a measurement.
Would it? They're pretty big.
No, it would not. They are massive. Don't they have them in Boston? They're freaking huge.
This house is very high, though.
The duck boats are significantly larger than you think they are.
Yeah, they are absolutely massive.
Like, they barely fit on the road.
Yeah, I thought they had them tooling around Boston. Am I making this up?
Yeah, they have duck tours, yeah.
Have you not seen them? They are massive.
I've ridden on them. I think I went on a duck tour.
What about one of those fan boats they use in Florida? Would that work here, or is the bay too choppy?
No, that's not good for the winter.
Because the bay's really shallow, which makes it hard to drive a lot of boats on it. But if you figure one of those fan boats are actually probably really nice for shallow.
What is that actually called? I'm drawing a blank.
I think it's called a fan.
It's called a fan boat.
Yeah.
Is it really? No, I thought there was another.
There's a
name for it.
hovercraft. That's a different thing.
No. I know exactly what you're thinking of. On the Everglades.
In Florida.
What was that show that was on the Everglades? You probably saw it on Naked Night. What the hell was that called?
Oh, I have no idea.
Probably not Dexter.
Jason, you're talking to Jason. Jason, what was the show where they were on the Everglades?
I have no idea. It doesn't really matter. I guess fan boat is what we're going to go with. You see, we keep getting distracted.
Us?
Oh, God.
Totally not my fault.
Yeah, not at all. Definitely not at all. All right, moving along. These show notes are already a mess. We've got Apple Watch bands, Beanie Babies, Gibbs Aquatica, duck boats, fan boats. Oh my gosh, it's an airboat. Yeah, that's what I know.
I put in a link to the Luck TV show. Don't forget to get that.
Oh yeah, the Luck TV show. Oh golly. this is a mess. This is an absolute mess, but this is what the people tune in for. All right, so moving right along, there's new colors. There's green and other green, otherwise known as Alpine green.
This is actually interesting because, normally in like the spring event, for Apple to release a new color of the like mainstream / value phone, that's been fairly common in recent years. But to release a new version of the Pro phone is less common. I believe. When was the last time that happened? I mean, I think they did a Project Red a while back, but I don't remember the last time they did a new Pro color in the spring.
Yeah, I can't remember one off the top of my head either, unless you count when they tried to release the white, what was it, iPhone 4 for like 18 months. Right. And never quite got around to it. Other than that, I can't think of any. But yeah, so Alpine green and green, and they look good at a glance. New iPhone SE 3 for $430, as introduced by Francesca Sweet, using A15. Apparently, it is, quote, incredibly popular with new iPhone users, quote. They also made an offhanded comment that they've added more new users to the iPhone 13 lineup than each of the prior 5 launches. The iPhone SE 3 gets 5G. I believe, I might be wrong about this, but I believe it does not get the millimeter wave wideband, ultra wideband, whatever it's called, super fancy technology. But it's a lot of phone with Touch ID for $430, which ain't bad.
It's following the SE pattern of it's been a couple of years since the last SE, and they gave it in the spring what the flagship phones had in the fall, guts wise, with a couple things cut here and there in an old case design. My question is, do you think this is the last Touch ID phone finally that we will see?
I hope so, but I mean, not that I'm against Touch ID, but it's just weirder and weirder to see it. It just looks like from a different era, Well,
on the other hand, though, like they leaned into that hard. Like when they were showing it, they showed a huge shot of the bottom half with the big Touch ID sensor. They mentioned the Touch ID sensor. They showed it. They showed a screenshot of Touch ID working. So I think clearly what they're going for here is a lot of people still love Touch ID on their phones and don't want to move from it, and so. They are keeping this around for a reason. Part of it is, budget and price and segmentation. But I think part of it is like just trying to keep those people happy that insist on Touch ID still. And that might be a while before it goes away. So like, might this be the last one? Or maybe it won't be. Maybe they're going to keep this style around even longer than we think, just because those like last Touch ID holdouts aren't really going anywhere.
I keep hearing how expensive, how surprisingly expensive, relatively speaking, obviously, Face ID is to deal with, I guess, all the sensors or whatever. And we still haven't really we saw a little bit of consolidation with when they made the notch smaller or whatever, but that may be the limiting factor. And it's not that they, or maybe they would do something like they did with the iPad Air, which we're going to get to in a second, where it's like, well, we're going to give you the new design, but no, you don't get Face ID because this is the budget price or whatever. So, but you can't do that with a phone, right? You can't, well... Can you put Touch ID in the power button on a phone-sized device? Probably not. I don't know. I had to do the measurements to figure it out, but I feel like that's what's holding this thing here. It's not so much that they love Touch ID, is that the replacement for it would bump this price up too much right now. At least that's my impression.
It could be both, honestly, but there are a lot of people who love it. Like if it was purely a value move, I don't think they would have accentuated it as much as they did in the presentation.
I mean, it's a differentiating factor. It's like, hey, if you like Touch ID, here's the one. Like, obviously, you're going to pitch it for how it's different from the other phones. But, that could be just selling what you have versus, updating. But anyway, they did not, to spoil it, they did not update the super cheap iPad to have flat size. But they did update the iPad Air, which was nice.
We are sponsored this week by New Relic. You know the drill. You're running some servers. You're just barely falling asleep and you're jolted awake by an emergency page. It's your night on call and something is wrong. The good news is you've got New Relic, so you can quickly run down the incident checklist and find the problem. Errors inbox. Lambda's good, RUM is good, but something is up in APM. Click the error and find the deployment marker where it all began. Dig deeper and there's another set of errors in Kubernetes starting after an update. Ask that team to roll back, and problem solved. That's the power of combining 16 different monitoring products into one platform, so engineering teams can see across their entire software stack in one place. You can pinpoint issues down to the line of code, so you know exactly why the problem happened and can resolve it quickly. That's why the dev and ops teams at DoorDash, GitHub, Epic Games, and more than 14,000 other companies use New Relic to debug and improve their software. Whether you're at a cloud-native startup or a Fortune 500 company, it takes just 5 minutes to set up New Relic in your environment. That next late night call is just waiting to happen. Get New Relic before it does. And you can get access to the whole New Relic platform and 100 gigs of data free forever with no credit card required by signing up at newrelic.com/ATP. That's New Relic, NEWRELIC.com/ATP. newrelic.com/ATP. Thank you so much to New Relic for sponsoring our show.
New iPad Air, which is in many ways not that different from the old, but it does have an M1 in it, so that's exciting.
Yeah, not an A15.
Yeah, this is an interesting choice. In the past, the iPads, like the bigger iPads, would have the X versions of the system on a chip. And of course, that one Z one, that was weird. But for the most part, it was like, you'd have the X version that had like, same base cores as the, a whatever iPhone one of that number, but then more GPUs or maybe one more CPU core. And so it's interesting in this case to not do that. So to give it the M1, first of all, that actually will hurt it single-threaded wise, in certain tests, because the M1 is based on the A14 cores, which of course we'll get to more later. So to launch a new M1 iPad today, I thought was a little bit surprising, but also giving it all that heft. It's going to have, I believe somebody confirmed that it has 8 gigs of RAM, or at least it can have 8 gigs of RAM. I don't know. And all that, massive CPU and GPU cores, huge parallel performance on the M1. To have that in the iPad Air and the iPad Pro definitely leaves the gap as a weird question mark of like, well, what does the Pro still offer above it? And there are some things, I made a quick list here. The big thing for me is that the Pro has speakers on both sides still, and none of the other iPads do as far as I know. So, if you have it in landscape, you have sound coming out of both sides, which is nice. Pro also has Face ID, has 120 hertz, the big triple camera system with the LiDAR, and the Pro's USB-C port is a Thunderbolt port, whereas the new Air is still just USB-C. And they said they made it a faster USB-C data rate, but it's still not Thunderbolt.
It's USB 3.1 Gen 2, which to figure out what that means, you have to go look up in the weird chart and realize that they renamed everything recently. But yes, it's faster USB. Yeah.
So it's interesting, but I feel like it's, now that the Air has so much of what the Pro has, it's pushing the Pro like more and more into specialty markets, which makes me think that maybe the Pro is I know that the Pro is kind of expected to have an update later this year, so maybe this will make more sense when that happens. But it does seem like there's decreasingly a gap between those two feature and spec wise. And yet there's still a pretty substantial price difference, and it's still a different model line. So I am kind of curious, like, where they're going to go with this.
I mean, I think this past year, where only the big iPad Pro had the good mini LED screen, right? That seems temporary to me, and I would imagine that when the new iPads both have mini LED and both have M2 or whatever, that this will make more sense. It's just that the cadence of iPad updates is always weird, and very often you get these strange things. I mean, even just like having the iPad Mini have a better, CPU than the iPad Air for a while. They're just all out of sync on the iPad line, so I think we'll always have these periods where it looks a little bit weird. But who cares? This is a great product. Like I'm always recommending the iPad Air to people because it's got the new design, new pencil, but it doesn't have all the features that most people don't care about. The very fancy screen, and even Face ID.
What's interesting too is if you actually, if you spec them up spec by spec, which so you have to spec up the Air to match the 256 gig configuration of the Pro because they don't have a matching base level. But if you spec them up both to 256, the Pro is only $150 more than the Air. So it's actually a smaller difference than I initially assumed. So maybe the answer is that the Air is just they're pushing the Air higher end, because I feel like if you buy an iPad, either you care about the cool features of it or you don't. If you don't, you get the cheap one, period. And that's what most people buy. You get, the base level, iPad nothing, and everyone buys that and they're mostly happy with it. And if you want anything else besides that, you're going to be spending $900. Like whatever, however you spec it, you're going to be, no one's getting a $500 iPad anymore.
I have no problems with the iPad Air. I recorded an episode of Clockwise earlier today where the thesis that was presented on Clockwise was that it's kind of a weird in-between product where it's not super duper cheap like the regular iPad or the iPad mini, and it's not the super baller, Pro. So it's kind of this weird in the middle. I don't necessarily begrudge that. I think it's nice for Apple to have an offering at basically any price point, but it is a little bit of, like you guys are saying, it's a little bit of a weird in the middle area where I'm not 100% sure who the right market is for it. But it looks real nice, and it's not extremely expensive. I mean, $600 to start is not terrible. And I don't know, for me, I don't need, in my experience anyway, I don't need a whole ton of storage on an iPad. Maybe I'm using my iPad wrong, but $600 for 64 gigs, that ain't bad. That ain't bad at all.
I should take a moment also to reflect on the ridiculousness of the Air suffix on this product. Like, what? We just ignore it now, but like, it does not, there's no analogy to the MacBook Air. It is not any particularly airier than the iPad Pro. It's just called this because that's what it was called a long time ago, and at one point it was actually pretty thin, but now it's just the same as the Pro. I guess it does have more air in it. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. Anyway.
No, the Pro has more air because the speakers have a lot of air in them.
But the Pro might be heavier. I don't know.
I mean, one thing, Air in the Mac line, when the MacBook Air first launched, it was this thing that was premium because it was so small and everything, but that was very short-lived. What the Air very quickly came to mean was the one most people should buy because it's pretty good and pretty small and light.
Yeah, but that doesn't connect with Air. And the thing is, Air got undercut by the skinny, plain old MacBook Adorable, but then the Adorable died, and the Air is like, now I am the skinniest.
Right, well, because the Adorable was never the cheap one. But it was
the airiest.
Right, but what I'm saying is when Apple says Air, they usually mean this is like it's small, but it's also like the entry level one and also the mainstream choice that you should probably buy. So it's interesting that in the Mac it is the entry level one, and it has been for a very long time. Mm-hmm. But so really, I think the iPad Air should be the lowest end iPad.
Should be the lowest, but the plain old iPad without a suffix. But it's not.
But I guess it would leave the question of what you call this one. Because it's not the Pro. I don't know I don't know what they would call. Yeah. Oh, they would call it the iPad Studio, of course.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Spoiler alert. No, I think the most reasonable thing, if not going the studio route, is the current the cheapo iPad becomes the iPad Air. So the thing that is now iPad becomes iPad Air
after they updated, hopefully, to the flat sides.
Okay, fair. But and then the iPad Air becomes just plain iPad. So iPad, no qualifier is the default. iPad Air becomes the cheapo. iPad Mini is obviously tiny. iPad Pro is if you have too much money, etc.
They're trying to rationalize their naming, because we know how it got to this point historically, but then on top of that, what we mentioned before, that the iPad updates are always weirdly staggered, so they're never in lockstep with each other. There's always leapfrogging each other in odd ways and encroaching on each other's supposed market segments. But we know the next update is coming to rationalize. They never settle down to be like, here's the iPad line, and all the prices and form factors make sense, especially with the whole Tim Cook practice of selling the old form for years and years and years, and instead of just saying flat sides everywhere on all iPads, you won't see that other design. It's like, nope, you're going to be seeing that design for a long time, and it's not going to make sense, and the names aren't going to make sense, and the update cadence isn't going to make sense. But for the most part, they're still good products. And anyway, I think I would much rather have this get the M1 than a lesser chip and economies of scale, making a lot of those M1s.
We are sponsored this week by Kolide. Kolide is a new take on endpoint management that asks the question, how can we get end users more involved? This is in contrast to old school device management tools like MDM, which lock down your employees' devices without considering their needs or even attempting to educate them about the security of their laptop. Kolide is built by like-minded security practitioners who in the past saw just how much MDM was disrupting their end users, often frustrating them so much they would throw their hands up and say they would just switch to their personal laptops without telling anyone. And in that scenario, everyone loses. Kolide, on the other hand, is different. Instead of locking down a device, Kolide takes a user-focused approach that communicates security recommendations to your employees directly on Slack. After Kolide, device security turns from a black and white state into a dynamic conversation. This starts with the end users installing the endpoint agent on their own through a guided process that happens right inside their first Slack message. From there, Kolide regularly sends employees recommendations when their device is in an insecure state. This can range from simple problems, like the screen lock not being set correctly, to hard to solve and nuanced issues, like asking people to secure the two-factor backup codes that are just sitting in their downloads folder. And because it's talking directly to employees, Kolide is educating them about the company's policies and how to best keep their devices secure using real, tangible examples, not theoretical scenarios. So that's Kolide, cross-platform endpoint management for Linux, Mac, and Windows devices that puts end users first for teams that Slack. So get endpoint management that puts your users first. Visit kolide.com/ATP. That's KOLIDE.com/ATP to learn more and activate a free trial today. It's a 14-day free trial. Enter your email when prompted to receive your free Kolide gift bundle after trial activation with no credit card required. Once again, that's Kolide, KOLIDE.com/ATP. Visit kolide.com/ATP today. Thank you so much to Kolide for sponsoring our show.
So then we get to the Mac, and this is where everything got really interesting to me. Let me ask you, and John, I think you're the most likely to remember this. Do you recall exactly when this whole Jade 2C, Jade 4C discussion happened? I believe it started with a Gurman report.
It was like last spring.
Sometime last year. It was
a long time ago.
And do you have like a date on your diagram that, I don't have the URL handy, but the one.
Yeah, if you look at the URL to them, I put the date is actually in the URL, and so you can see like how long it was. I think my diagram was like May, maybe. You can look it up. Look up one of my tweets in a second, but I will start this section by saying something that someone else noted. I forget who it was. Somebody on Twitter made a little montage video of. It was Ben Thompson. A little montage video of this presentation saying how in this presentation in particular, and historically you'll recognize this pattern, but in this presentation it was notable because they did it almost every single time. Before they would talk about a product, before everything we just talked about, before they talked about the iPhone, the iPhone SE, the iPad Air, they would start by talking about, here's the Apple silicon that lets us make this great thing. Even though it's not new, the M1 we know about, the A15, it's not like there's new, they didn't have any silicon announcements, but they would add a silicon section to all those products just to emphasize, like, why we're great? We have great products. Yeah, but the reason we have great products is because of great silicon. And for a while now with the Macs, which obviously it makes sense because they're transitioning the Macs to these new processors, they would begin the Mac section by talking about a processor before they've even announced any Macs. They've done it in many presentations, and they did it again. So let's talk about the Mac. And what's the first thing they talk about? Not a Mac. They're just going to talk about chips for a while. And then you're going to see, the Mac that chip is in. I don't mind that. I think it's a great way to start it. We get to see Johnny Cerrugi in his little lab telling us very emphatically about their awesome chips, and for the most part, they are awesome. Did you find the date on the...
No, I'm looking as we speak, and the chat room let me down. I'm sorry.
Here
we go. It's May 21 of last year. So May 21, 2021.
Yeah, so that was... to refresh everyone's memory, it was the Gurman rumor, and he described a bunch of stuff. And then I made this diagram saying, okay, if we take what is described in this rumor and make pictures of it, what does it look like? And I mostly did it just to see how big would they be? Like, at that point we just had the M1, and I wanted to see basically like M1 is this square this big. If we map out all these rumors, how big do the squares get? And figuring out that they get monstrous, and we've been talking about these things for over a year now. And Apple has been knocking them down. First, they came out with I said the second row of the diagram showed the what would eventually come to be the M1 Pro and M1 Max. And then in this presentation, we did the third row of the diagram, which ended up being called the M1 Ultra, which is more than Max because Ultra is obviously more than Max. The theory I had earlier today was that Max does not stand for maximum, but is short for Maximilian. So it makes perfect sense. Good old M1 Max, old Maxi.
Well, and I feel like the focus on the chips as the primary introduction to the computers, honestly, in this day and age, especially in the context of a desktop, but in this day and age, I think that matters more because it helps dictate what these machines actually are. Like, it helps dictate what class of machine you can build, how good of that version, or how good a version of that can exist. And so, like, by leading with the chip, and then by eventually showing, the enclosure, which we'll get to, of like, well, here's just like a box. Basically, it's a nice looking box. It's a box with a lot of useful holes on it, but it's still just basically a little box. And because when you're using a desktop, it doesn't matter. Like, this I feel like is such a great, breath of fresh air compared to the, like, unedited Johnny Ive, worst days there, where the form of the machine was held as higher importance and a higher priority in its design than the stuff that went inside of it. And by having that as their priorities, like, look at this gorgeous object. By the way, it has some Xeon in it, but look at this gorgeous object. What you ended up with is gorgeous computers that didn't serve their needs as well. Whereas now they start with, what kind of amazing chip can we make for, market segment X in the, pro desktops or small laptops or whatever. And they make the chip and they design the computer around it. And in certain cases, we're seeing this like over the last couple of years, in certain cases, certain parts of the enclosure have to get less beautiful or bigger or heavier, but that then makes a better product. And I feel like Apple of 7 or 8 years ago wouldn't have done that, and they didn't do that, and it was to their expense, and to all of our expenses. Whereas now, leading with the chip and designing the computer around the technical needs and the user's needs, like when I know we'll get to this, but when I saw the holes on the front of the Mac Studio, I almost cried. I was so happy. Like, because this is a company that is now valuing usefulness and its customers' actual needs over visual purity in so many ways. And this just makes me so incredibly happy as a Mac user.
Yeah, the interesting thing about, so designing the chips and designing around them, getting back to the diagram, is that what the rumor laid out over a year ago and what this diagram shows is, when Apple's making its own chips, you think, oh, now Apple can make whatever it wants. But Apple is still subject to, economies of scale and all the other factors that, make it not possible for Apple to make a brand new custom-made chip for every single possible application. So instead, Apple wisely had a plan. And the plan was, we're going to make building blocks, and we're going to use those building blocks to make a bunch of very similar chips that we think we can assemble into final products, final system-on-a chips that are appropriate for the various products we have planned. But they share a lot, and that's the point of that diagram. The Jade C die is the building block of the future of high performance ARM-based Macs. And here's how you use that building block to build up. We had the M1, but the M1 was not the building block. It was Jade C that was the building block. So we get the chopped version, which is the Pro. We get the unchopped version, which is the Max, and now we get the fused together unchopped versions, which is the Ultra. And the reason I bring this up now is because at the start of this presentation, blame Apple, they did the sequencing. They said, and I think this is a direct quote, "We're adding one last chip to the M1 family." This is before they introduced the M1 Ultra. One last chip. So the diagram has another row. It has a fourth row, because the first row is the M1, and then it shows the Max and the Pro, and then it shows the Ultra, and then it shows the Hyper, the Ultimate, the Super, the Epic,
the Plaid.
Yeah, we're not doing Plaid, the Ludicrous, whatever. It shows basically, like 4 Jade C dies. What is it called? Jade 4C die or whatever.
Yeah.
And when we talked about this in the past, it was like, look, you can't economically make a chip that big. You can't even economically make a chip as big as the Ultra, which is why they didn't. They do the thing that we're going to talk about in a second, where they sort of have them communicating to each other over this very high-speed bus with an interconnect that we talked about in past shows, right? But you can't have that. But so what? If they hadn't said this line, we would be like, okay, well, boy, I can't wait to see what the one in the Mac Pro is going to be. Because it's supposed to be 4 of these. These rumors have been dead on every step of the way over the course of a year. These rumors have been, that rumor from a year ago, it's turning out to be true every time. We didn't know the names, but you look at them, it's like, yep, same number of execution units. It's made the same way. Everything is just coming up just the way we expected, right? But when they said one last chip, it's like, well, I guess maybe there's not going to be a 4-way thing. So here's what I have to say about that. So in episode 453, how long ago was that?
It was 21st of October of last year.
Back in October, I tried to give a warning to everybody, and from something I've been thinking about and mulling over for a while now, that rumor is so old, and that the Mac Pro is going to be, in theory, so late, like maybe the end of this year or whatever, that a lot might have changed by the time we get to making the Mac Pro. Like maybe almost all of that diagram is going to come true. At that point, the middle part hadn't even come true yet. Well, maybe almost all the diagram is going to come true, but the Mac Pro one is so far off in the distance that if anything is going to vary, it's going to be that. Maybe they couldn't make that in time. Maybe a different roadmap interrupts that. Maybe they have something else planned for the Mac Pro or whatever. And so when they said, and that's what I said in that episode back in October, like, don't put all your, even though it looks like, it's coming true, just like the diagram shows, that last step was going to be a doozy. So they said one last chip. So that makes it sound like there won't be any more chips in the, quote, M1 family. Now, what is the M1 family? The M1 family is whatever Apple says it is. But we think of it as chips made with cores based on the M1, because the M1 had the Ice Storm and Firestorm cores. Those are the things that make up Jade C die and their, all that stuff. So lots of people saw that and said, oh, the Mac Pro, it's going to have an M2-based system on a chip with 40 cores. And as we've discussed in past shows, I will be extremely surprised if a 40-core M2-based chip ships this year for the Mac Pro, because that tends not to be how silicon is done. You don't say we have a brand new chip and the first one we're going to make has 40 cores. Like, you usually start smaller and you build up. You start with the small chip and you make it bigger, slightly bigger, because you get better at making the components of that chip. Now, just because that's the way it's happened in the past doesn't mean it's physically impossible to do that. It is plausible that it could, but I would be very surprised, and I think a lot of people would be very surprised, just because historically that's not how chip making has gone. So I know we're getting derailed into Mac Pro territory already, but it's their fault for bringing this stuff up. So I just do want to talk about the possibilities for the Mac Pro. This is the last chip in the M1 family. One possibility is the Mac Pro just has an M1 Ultra. That's crappy, because the M1 Ultra does not have enough GPU cores to be remotely competitive with the current Mac Pro, right? So I hope that's not the case, but hey, that could be a thing. Who knows? And by the way, the reason we're talking about Mac Pro is Apple later confirms at the very end of the presentation that the Mac Pro is absolutely coming. So this is not speculation. Second possibility, put two M1 Ultras in there. Oh, we didn't make another chip. It's just two M1 Ultras, and they're connected by a different interconnect between the two M1 Ultras. Or it's two M1 Ultras back to back and stuck together, and we don't call it a new chip. It's just M1 Ultra, M1 Ultra X2. That would have 40 cores. It would, it would be plausible. It would be fine. Right? And then the final possibility is the Mac Pro is not going to have an M1-based chip in it at all. It's going to have an M2-based thing with 40 core. And it's going to come out in 2023. I don't even know. So Apple continues to be extremely frustrating when it comes to the Mac Pro. If they hadn't said this, we would all just be blissfully unaware and be like, here we go, on our way to 40 core, it's going to be great. But no, they just have to throw this in there and say, you thought you knew what the Mac Pro was going to be, but you actually don't. Or maybe you do, but we're just screwing with you. Haha, one last chip in the M1 family. So that was frustrating / intriguing. On the subject of having an actual, Jade 4C die, like the possibility of that, Hector Martin, who's been porting Linux to the M whatever chips, was looking at the M1 Max and had this to say in a tweet. The IRQ controller registers on the M1 Max go die 0, die 1, and then other stuff. There is literally no space for dies beyond those two to exist in there. If they somehow glued 4 chips together, one pair wouldn't be able to send interrupts to the other. That doesn't make any sense. And conversely, the IRQ controller claims the theoretical design max is 8 dies, so it's not like they were stuck with 2. They could have instantiated with room for more dies, but they didn't. So the implication seems to be, both physically speaking and looking at the innards of the chip, that the M1 Max, at the very least, which is what he was looking at the time because he hadn't seen the M1 Ultra then, was not designed to have more than 2. And lo and behold, the M1 Ultra is 2 M1 Maxes stuck together with this cool internet connect thing, right? So can there physically be 4 M1 Maxes stuck together? Is M1 Ultra really just 2 M1 Maxes stuck together? It sure looks like it. So that's another nail in the, there's not going to be 4 Jade 4C die in the way that you think, just because it seems like the M1 Max wasn't made to do that, and the M1 Ultra does not do that, and it doesn't seem like there's a way to make that work. Maybe they could be back to back, but it just doesn't seem like that's in the cards from what we know now. It's hard to know because we don't know what they're doing for the Mac Pro. The second thing is, if it's 2 M1 Ultras, it's like, oh, we didn't make a new chip, it's just 2 M1 Ultras. How do the 2 M1 Ultras talk to each other? You would think that's not a big problem. That's been multi-processor Macs for a long time. That used to be the way they made high-performance Macs. You get multiple processors, right? But those Macs did not have the RAM stuck, wedged, welded to the CPU. And so what you'd end up with is good old Numa. There wasn't there a meme about that somewhere?
Yodel-hee. Sorry, go ahead.
Peasy.
NUMA stands for NUMA. It's non-uniform memory access. What it basically means is that if you had two M1 Ultras in there, they would each come with their own complement of RAM that is sort of, unchangeable and connected to the CPU. That's the unified memory architecture, right? But they would each have their own pool of it. And so if you wanted to have a Mac Pro with 256 gigabytes of RAM, you'd have one M1 Ultra with 128, another M1 Ultra with 128. But each one of those M1 Ultras would be really close to its own 128. But, not physically speaking, but latency-wise, farther from the other 128, right? And that's what non-uniform memory access means. It means that you have some pool of memory that's quote-unquote close to you that you can get at fast, and there's some other pool of memory that's far away. When you had traditional multiprocessor chips, instead you'd have two CPUs so that you'd have one pool of memory that they both access that they were essentially both uniformly far from, right? The unified memory architecture, having the RAM really close to the system on the chip, is great and gives incredible memory bandwidth. But if you put two M1 Ultras in there, now half your RAM is really fast and half your RAM is less fast. Now maybe they have a cool new interconnect that is different than the one that we're going to talk about in a second for the M1 Ultra, that it connects the two M1 Ultras, so it's not that bad, and the distant RAM is not that bad, and it just looks like one pool of memory, just like the M1 Ultra does. We don't know. We still have to wait for that Mac Pro, but it is mysterious and intriguing and slightly concerning to me. We'll get to that maybe at the end when I talk about the possibilities for Mac Pro stuff. But in the meantime, let's look at the M1 Ultra and what they actually did do by... I keep trying so hard for this whole section not to say they took two M1 Maxes and put them butt to butt, because it's a movie reference and I don't want to do it, and it's unseemly, but they really did. So Casey, please save me.
It's okay. Butts are funny.
So I remember, and I will be the first to tell you I have the world's worst memory, but I swear that when you were working on your chip diagrams that eventually made it onto shirts, and no, we don't know what we're going to do about shirts yet, but... Should
we just make pants?
Somebody suggested
onesies,
a onesie.
Raincoats, yeah, there's all sorts of ideas.
No, because each leg is an M1 Max, and
they're not that long.
They can just join in the middle. Shorts, then we should make shorts.
Yeah,
that's definitely it. What do you call it when you have the tails on your coat? Isn't there a name for that other than tail?
I think it's called coattails.
Yeah, Fanboats and Coattails.
There you go. Title. So I swear to you, I remember that you were working on these diagrams and you were looking closely at the diagrams that Apple had showed and like the scans that they had showed. And you had said to us, I could swear that it was John that had said to us, there's this section off at the bottom or left or right or wherever it was that they never really explained. What is this about? And I swear we talked about this at some point on some show.
We did, but it wasn't like I discovered it. Everyone was talking about it. In fact, on the very last episode, I just mentioned casually offhand, and of course, there's the chip interconnect. So it becomes so accepted as accepted wisdom based on the shots that there was some kind of interchip interconnect. That was sort of an open secret, But yeah, we did talk about that back when the original diagrams came out. That we still don't have the mystery solved of why the execution units were repeated and whether they were trying to hide the interconnect or whether they just have redundant stuff. We don't know all the answers. But anyway, this is not a shock. What they actually did was not a shock. They have two M1 Maxes and what do they call the thing? Ultra Fusion.
Mm-hmm. And it's a die-to-die interconnect.
Yeah, I feel like they've used the word fusion one too many times.
Words have stopped having all meaning when the Max is not the biggest chip.
It's Maximilian. It's just his name.
All right. So Sruji says the Ultra Fusion architecture uses a silicon interposer that has twice the connection density of any technology available. It connects over 10,000 signals and provides an enormous 2.5 terabytes per second of low latency interprocessor bandwidth between the two dies using very little power. That's more than 4 times the bandwidth of the leading multi-chip connector technology. The result is an SoC with blazing performance due to low latency, massive bandwidth, and incredible power efficiency. And thanks to the magic of the Ultra Fusion architecture, it behaves like a single chip to software and preserves the benefits of unified memory. This is cool stuff. It really, really is.
Yeah, that's the big advantage, in particular for the GPU stuff, because typically dual GPU things, the games would have to be aware of it or whatever. So even though it's two M1 Maxes shoved together, they're shoved together and sort of connected in such a way that you can just think of it as one giant chip. Again, there's no way that you could economically make a Jade 4C die, and apparently making a Jade 2C die is also not particularly economical. So they made them separate, and they just take the good ones and they stick them together with this interconnect technology. And I believe we had someone write in with, I think it was the first time, 6 months, 8 months ago, the first time I saw the word silicon interposer. And here it is coming back up again, because we were discussing like how you could, when we're talking about City of Chips, how you can connect all this stuff together. If you have them as separate dies, how do you get them into one package so that they talk to each other in a high efficiency way? And this kind of technology was one of the options. So lo and behold, here it is. This is things that people don't need to know about, but it just goes to show that Apple is not immune from the economics of making silicon chips. They have just found very clever ways to maximize performance while not breaking the bank.
Yep. So the M1 Ultra can have up to 128 gigs of unified memory, a 20-core CPU with 16 high-performance and 4 high-efficiency cores, a 64-core GPU, a 32-core neural engine, 800 gigs a second of memory bandwidth, which according to Apple is 10 times the latest PC desktop chip. This thing sounds like it is going to scream. And as the owner of a mid-range M1 Max, I can tell you, I don't exactly long for power today. I cannot fathom what this is going to be like.
Yep, it's a Jade 2C die. Here it is. All the specs are the same. We'll get to the more interesting parts of the economics of this product. But if you get one where all the parts work, you get 2x the parts that you're getting in an M1 Max. And the GPUs more or less scale linearly like you would expect, and the multi-core scales according to your workloads. And we're continuing along on track, despite the fact that Apple essentially totally derailed the train at the start of this by saying this is the last M1 chip, and we don't know what that means.
Indeed. So then we had a testimonial, which normally I wouldn't call out, but I did enjoy that it was all women during that testimonial, and this was recorded or released, I should say, on International Women's Day. So that's pretty cool. And then, speaking of women, we had a friend of other shows and not ours, Colleen Novielli, come in.
Well, hold on. Colleen was the product manager of the Mac Studio. She's a friend of ours. That's
fair.
I'll declare that right now. Never met her, never talked to her. She's a friend of ours.
If only there was an episode where we discussed who is and is not a friend. But I guess she is a friend of ours, whether or not we are a friend of hers. Or maybe did I get that backwards? You know what I'm saying? One way or the other. It's a single.
Is this like a mob thing? Like what?
It's a link list.
It's a link
single link list, not
doubly linked list. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. So Colleen Novielli introduces the Mac Studio. There were some rumblings in the days leading up to the event that Studio was going to play a role in this, and there was going to be a product or products announced. Honestly, I don't even care about the Mac Studio. Can we talk about the next thing they talked about?
Wait, we'll get there. We'll get there.
I'm kidding.
Let me start on the Mac Studio. Well, first, I want to say that it's a shame that we once again just missed the last minute rumors. But I mean, this is it's hard to pick the right day to do the podcast. I think we still have the right one because we tend to go after events. But it seems like whenever there's going to be an event, we do record an episode, and then the late breaking rumors come out, and all late breaking rumors were like studio. So. If you listen to the last episode, you were like, wow, these guys got things totally wrong. But the thing is, by the time the event came, if you had read the rumors, a lot of this stuff leaked out. And obviously, we've been talking about this for over a year. Like the rumor, I think it was also from Gurman, the quote-unquote half-size Mac Pro. And then eventually, in the week leading up to it, we got the tall Mac Mini. They're going to do a tall Mac Mini. Is the tall Mac Mini the same thing as the half-size Mac Pro? All sorts of late-breaking stuff. All extremely accurate. And before we start talking about the reality of this machine, I just want to say that I think a tall Mac Mini is not attractive.
No, it is not.
I'm sorry, Mac Studio.
It is not.
I agree. Like when they were doing that video where they were showing it like in everyone's workspaces right after the introduction of it, I think it kind of looks bad sitting under a monitor on your desk.
It's not great. It's not great.
Like I am so happy that this computer is what it is in so many other ways, but I do agree it is not attractive.
Yeah, and again, I'm not slamming it. I'm saying this is not a beauty contest. Like Marco was saying, I don't actually care that you've made the most beautiful object. I care what's inside. It's what's inside that counts, and also the ports to get to it. Both of those things.
Yes.
Just like people. That was all right. That's Marlon will appreciate that one. Okay, but I really do think that there is certain something missing from the design of this product. Now, part of it is because the Mac Mini has been a product for so long and we've become so accustomed to it. But I will say the Mac Mini has gone through many iterations of its rounded rectangle extrusion form, and almost all the iterations have looked progressively nicer And maybe it's because they've gotten lower and wider, like the sports car thing. You make a car lower and wider, people find it more attractive, right? So the Mac Mini has gotten lower and wider, and I think it's looked cooler. And this reversed that trend by taking it lower and wider and saying, now you are a top hat. It's just like there's no... And I know they pointed out like that it's made of one thing of aluminum. I'm sure it's going to be solid as a bank vault. I'm sure it's going to fulfill its function well. Like, I'm not saying this is a bad computer design. And I'm not just saying that my Mac Pro is prettier, although it absolutely is, for a bazillion times the price and half the speed. But anyway,
don't forget the power consumption.
Yeah. This is not a particularly attractive computer, and I kind of wish that they had made it a little bit nicer. That's it. I don't want to slam it too much. It's just my personal opinion. I think it gets the job done. And the thing is, it is small. It is not big. It's not going to dominate your desk. So I think it's fine.
No, I completely agree with you. And I feel like part of the problem I have with it is the front of it has so much just dead space on it. As tacky as I would normally find this to be, I almost wonder if, what do you call, is it embossed that's on the bottom of these laptops, the new laptops where it has... No, just put like studio on the front of there, embossed. And, come on, at least it would break up all that dead space.
How about RGB lighting?
Yeah, right. That makes everything better. So I hear.
How about a series of really complicated holes that people can't figure out how to make?
Yeah, all the tryptophobia people really messes them up. Yeah,
right.
Things growing. Yeah.
I got to say, when we started this episode almost an hour ago, I did not expect that by the midway point, maybe we would be wearing top hats and have coattails and be getting on airboats. Like, this is a journey that I was not prepared for.
The Mac Studio has a 5-head.
What?
A what?
A 5-head. Wasn't that a Seinfeld episode?
Oh, I don't think
it's
so.
It's like a 4-head, but taller. It's a 5-head.
This sounds like something that would be like, edited out, like, the cutting room floor of the Seinfeld writer's room.
I'm not making this up. 5-head is a thing.
All right. Well, moving on.
Yeah.
So this is the Mac Studio. I got to say, I did not buy one of these. And if this had come out before the 14-inch MacBook Pro, which, by the way, still freaking love, I would have been really tempted by this, even despite the relatively hefty price tag, which we'll get to. But I'm living a pretty good life right now, and I don't want to mess with my system. And honestly, I don't long for power right now. Remind me of this in like a year when they come out with an M2 and I must have it. But sitting here now, I really don't long for power. And as much as I am so genuinely excited about this machine, in so many ways, they did exactly what we want. And this is what you were saying earlier, Marco. They didn't do what they wanted, largely. They did what I want and what you want and what we want. And that is so exciting. And this is the same thing we saw with the laptops. They were giving us our ports back. They're giving us things that help us do our jobs. Imagine this, a bicycle for the mind that helps you actually do your friggin' job. Like, how exciting is this? We're back and better than ever, baby. So I did not buy one of these. Marco, how many have you bought?
Just last week, I said I have been very happy with my desktop laptop and separate laptop situation. Although I have to format and pave the laptop because I got some weird stuff going on. Like, it doesn't get... I don't know. Sidetrack. I have to reboot it for FaceTime calls to come in on it.
Oh,
like,
cool.
It doesn't get alerted. It's as if it's in Do Not Disturb, but it isn't. Anyway, I don't know what that's about. So I've got to format and reinstall. There's a couple other weird things about that installation. That I don't know how it happened because it was clean. Anyway, but I was just saying last week how my desktop laptop, I was super happy with this setup. I, too, have chosen not to buy the Mac Studio right now.
I'm stunned.
Well, because here's, in a world where where the laptops were what they were a few years ago, hot, compromised, loud, desktops could outperform them, pretty well for the kind of tasks I was doing. The laptops of a few years ago sucked. The laptops now don't. They're really great. And what you were just saying a few minutes ago, how you're not really hurting for performance, most of the time I'm not either. And in most of the ways that I would be hurting for performance, I'm not even sure how much more of the same CPU cores would help at this point, because I'm usually not waiting on all my cores to do something anymore. Like now, the M1 Max is awesome. I really am not hurting for performance most of the time. And again, and I think if I were to buy the M1 Ultra Mac Studio, I think it would drop my build times by, maybe 30% at most. but they're already so short that I'm not sure that that's worth the downside of not having it be a laptop anymore. And because the MacBook Pro seems to suffer from almost none of the shortcomings that laptops used to suffer from, like I would actually be losing functionality by going to a desktop right now, because I do still go back and forth between a couple of places on a regular basis. I do still very occasionally travel, although I haven't been on an airplane in a couple of years. But it is really nice to be able to just take my desktop laptop with me and to have all my files as a desktop when I do travel. But then, but to not be constantly unplugging it and plugging it like as my only portable thing. Anyway, so I really do love the desktop laptop lifestyle. And the other factor that will play into this significantly in the latter part of the show is that I already have the XDR. I kind of already made this ridiculous setup, and I love it. And anything I would change about it with what's available right now, I think would make it worse in some way that I care about, without making it better enough to make the change worthwhile. Now, that being said, if I was still on an Intel Mac and I was looking to get a new desktop setup, maybe I'd make a different decision.
Just hypothetically,
right? Suppose I had bought a very, very large,
very
large,
expensive.
very expensive. Cost more than my first car Mac Pro.
Just hypothetically,
this would be a really compelling option, especially if I wasn't really using what makes the Mac Pro currently differentiated, like card slots. I think this would be very compelling. But right now, my personal needs don't really have a role for this. But that being said, I am so happy this exists.
Yep.
And
same.
Because I've seen a number of reactions to this, kind of themes to the reactions. Some of the themes immediately about half the people who I saw react to the price of the Mac Studio. We'll talk about the monitor later, but the price of the Mac Studio, about half the people were like, yeah, that's about right. And the other half were like, oh my God, $4,000 for the big one. and people even freaking out about $2,000 for the base model. And it's like, we've been waiting for a reasonably priced pro level performance Mac desktop for a long time. The last time a reasonably priced pro-level performance Mac desktop existed was, I believe, the 2006 Mac Pro, where there was a configuration you could get for $1,800 or $2,000. And that was more than a decade ago. And so to have this come out and be that level of performance, the base model I'm talking about first, that level of performance with just the M1 Max in a very, port-covered, well-cooled desktop for $2,000 in today's dollars, that's pretty good. Now, I understand that, PC hardware is cheaper. Yeah, you get what you pay for right now. PC hardware right now sucks, and Mac hardware right now is really good. So, good for you on your PC. By the way, I own PCs. I just bought. I had to replace that Adam's desktop or Adam's gaming laptop. It's really having problems now. And I'm pretty sure blue screening when I plug in an HDMI cable is probably not a software problem. But anyway, so that's story for another day. But I say this as a PC owner. We now own 4 PCs.
Oh my gosh!
and as a multi-Mac owner, obviously over time, PC hardware, you're getting what you pay for with a lot of that stuff or less. And this hardware, just the base model alone here, the base model of $2,000 for an M1 Max, 32 gigs of RAM, 512 gig SSD, that's an awesome machine for what is a very reasonable price for what it is. And if you are balking at that, wanting I want the X-Mac, an expendable tower made of component parts. Look, that doesn't exist, and this shows you that will never exist. But the role that we all always wanted the X-Mac to fill, what to Apple was mid-priced, but to many of us was high-priced. I didn't have a Mac Pro until 2008, because in 2006, I couldn't afford one yet. It was $2,000. I couldn't afford $2,000 in 2006. And I was so upset in 2008 when it came out, when the next one came out, and it was $2,800 for the configuration that was reasonable. But Now it's, 12 years later, 14, whatever it is, I can't do math, 14 years later, to be $2,000 for what this base model offers, and then to have some headroom on that if you want or need more than that, you can spec it up. $4,000 for the highest CPU, or almost highest CPU. I guess there's the extra GPU model for an extra, $1,000, whatever, but most people don't need that. $4,000 for the highest CPU option, basically, 64 gigs RAM, 1 terabyte SSD. That's really good. If I look back at how I've configured like my iMacs over the years, where, back when I was using those as my desktops, configuring an iMac really high to this level of performance or to these capacities is usually more than this. And yes, this doesn't have a screen. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But even when you factor in the price of the future discussed screen, this is actually pretty much in line with where things have been for quite some time. Once you consider what you're actually getting, again, compare spec for spec, and consider, inflation, and, it's this. I think these are very, very well positioned. I think what you're getting for the price is very good, and it is right in line with what we would expect Apple to charge for such a thing, without being super outrageous on that scale. So, thumbs up for me. I'm not buying one yet, but thumbs up for me regardless.
I have a couple of points here. First of all, I would like to publicly acknowledge your restraint, because this is a multi-day.
It's only been a couple of days. Give him a
for Marco, Marco's usually measured in minutes, not days.
No, he's had this thing where he has kind of like a delay period where he thinks about it and tries not to give in. But we'll see how long this lasts.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like when Kramer walks in, I'm out. It's like,
yeah, right.
Exactly. It's gonna.
Well, and the other thing I wanted to point out is you've introduced a little bit of new thought technology for me. So, one of the things that the Mac Studio and I'm jumping ahead ever so slightly, the apparent death of the 27-inch iMac is that it leaves a hole in the lineup. And I think that hole is there, but it's not quite as big or wide, if you will, as I thought it was, because I'm thinking back to my iMac Pro, which I loved so much. I really did. But I believe, and this was somewhat my own choice because of the spec I bought, but I think I paid like $7,500 for that thing or something like that. Whatever the number was, it was ridiculous. And for the Mac Studio with the M1 Ultra and the, I don't know, this thing I'm excited to talk about in a minute, the Studio Display, you're looking at what? A little less than $6,000. I mean, now, I'm not trying to say that $6,000 isn't a crap ton of money. It absolutely is a crap ton of money. But this is not an unprecedented price point for the performance that you're getting. And I think you're right, Marco. I didn't really think of it that way, but this is the compute component of an iMac Pro in spirit, if you look at it in the right light.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, you look back, the iMac Pros that I've bought over the years, usually they cost so much I wouldn't even want to discuss it in public.
Yeah,
I've usually, well over $5,000 for in almost every case. So I think my most expensive might have been like $6,800 or something when I got the 4 terabyte SSD back when that was fairly new. That's what you get a lot for that. But going back to this again, we'll talk about the display. But the display being, in my opinion, only, and we'll get to that too, $1,700 or whatever, $1,600, $1,700, whatever it is. So the price of the M1 Max, not the super big CPU, so like base model Mac Studio plus Mac Studio Display, you're looking at like $3,700. That's actually really not bad when you look at the price of what a 27-inch iMac spec to this level actually cost.
Well, and the iMac Pro started at $5,000, didn't it? Or am I making that up?
Yep.
But it came in space gray. I mean, let's be fair.
Well, that is actually a genuine
that makes
point.
it tremendously faster.
Well, it makes it better looking.
Should have had racing stripes or maybe a little fin on the back.
All right, easy, big fella, easy.
You two have made a mockery of my show notes here. Let me try to get this back on track.
Sorry, Dad.
Yeah, I was going to say in the pre-flight, I meant to say, but I totally forgot in the pre-flight that we should talk about what we did and didn't buy and save that to the end, but you two didn't do that, but I'm going to do that, so you'll have to wait till the end to hear what's going on over here in terms of purchases. So one tidbit about the Mac Studio, if you get it with the M1 Ultra, it's 2 pounds heavier because they use a copper heatsink instead of aluminum. I like the fact that the Verge article, they got a quote from Apple about this, giving the explanation. That's Apple's explanation, by the way. That it has a copper heatsink.
That's fantastic. I was wondering, like, if they just gave you like half of a heatsink, like you got like the left half,
right? And because remember that we'll see when they crack these things open. But the whoever authored the Verge article, they did the work. They did the due diligence. They got the quote from Apple that said it's because of a larger copper heatsink, whatever. And then they said, at room temperature, this is the Verge article, at room temperature, copper is 8.96 grams per cubic centimeter, whereas aluminum is 2.70 grams. That means that the design of the heatsink is exactly the same. The copper version would be over 3 times heavier than the aluminum one. Yay, physics and chemistry.
You make mine with the tungsten heatsink. I want to see how that feels.
So that's cool. Just to get to what this machine actually has on it, it's got on the back of it so many ports, just the best, all the ports.
I'm so
when
happy.
they were going from left to right and panning across them, not panning. Sorry, Todd. When they were doing a tracking shot, going across the ports in the back, it's got 4 Thunderbolt ports, right?
Wait, what's the difference? Is panning like your feet are still, but the camera moves, whereas tracking your feet move?
Panning is you have the camera on a tripod and you twist it on the tripod,
right?
And tracking is you have the camera on a set of wheels and you move it in parallel with the,
It's like moving versus strafing in a first-person shooter.
Looking versus strafing.
Yeah.
You're moving forward and back. That's dollying, right? And then tracking.
I don't have the diagram in front of me, Casey. Don't quiz me.
I know. I'm looking for it. Here it is. All right, we'll put it in the show notes. I'm so sorry, Todd. I apologize on behalf of all of us. We're a mess.
Send the joke one that has the director's version, not the director's or the.
Camera movement guide versus client camera movement guide.
There you go, client. That wasn't director, because that would be directors know these things, but clients don't. Anyway,
we're not getting sidetracked.
Yeah, 10 gig Ethernet. That shows that it's a pro computer, because Apple's pro computers have 10 gig Ethernet. 2 USB-A. Yay! Like, I know people, who cares? It's USB-A or whatever, but that shows that, like, they could have left those out. It's weird. They're not super pro. Johnny Ive would have left them out, but you've got room on the back of the computer. USB-A doesn't take that much bandwidth. You've got these monster chips in there. Just put some USB-A ports, and you know what? It's got them. Love it. 2 of them, not just 1.
Yeah, we still use them. Like, every desktop that's out there, you probably have at least one thing you're going to plug into USB-A. Like, for me, I plug my keyboard dongle into that. Like, everyone has stuff like that.
Yeah, and again, you've got room on the back. It's not a big computer. It's not huge. It's mini-ish, but you've got it there, so put it in. It's got HDMI for the same reason. Who wants HDMI? Darn, isn't everyone going to have a fancy monitor? No, maybe you have an HDMI monitor. It's fine. Put the port there. Or
what if you want to run it headless for some reason and you need one of those silly little dongles like I have on my Mac Mini?
Right. The pro audio jack with high impedance headphones, right? Because make the good version of everything, and then it's got ports on the front, which no Mac Mini has ever had before, because apparently people didn't sit in front of their Mac Minis. Let's not start this again. It has ports in the front. It's got 2 USB-C, but if you get the Ultra, those front ports become Thunderbolt 4 because there's just so many freaking Thunderbolt, controllers inside the system on chips. The front ones can be Thunderbolt as well. So that's 6 Thunderbolt 4 ports on the Ultra, I guess. That's what you get when you throw 2 Maxes in there, I guess. And then SD card. The only real disappointment in terms of the slots is the SD card, I think, is still not one of the faster SD card standard things. Again, it's an obvious update, just like we talked about in the MacBook Pros. Maybe on a $4,000 computer, put in a better card reader, but whatever. Like, you can always attach one to it. Attach one to one of the USB-A ports, maybe, if it's fast enough. But yeah, that's all great. And they brag about what you can connect it to. You can connect four Pro Display XDRs to it, plus a 4K TV. It's kind of interesting that you can't connect 6 Pro Display XDRs because it's got 6 Thunderbolt 4 ports, but I guess they run out of bandwidth eventually. And no one's going to have that set up because it's ridiculous.
Well, and also, they did mention, you breezed by it a second ago, that the front ports are not Thunderbolt. They're only USB 3 if you have the M1 Max instead of the M1 Ultra, because I guess you need the additional Thunderbolt controllers on the M1 Ultra to make them Thunderbolt. Mm-hmm. So maybe they're just like not worth I wonder if maybe the M1 Ultra versions do actually support 6 displays, and they just didn't want to say that to avoid confusion. I don't know. Maybe not.
It'd be weird having monitors connected to the front of your computer, though.
Yeah, that would be weird. I mean,
you could just rotate it sideways, then everything's coming out of the side. It's very symmetrical. And so they did a bunch of bragging about performance. I mean, the M1 Max is the M1 Max. Like, it is what it is. They didn't say it was clocked higher than it was in the MacBook Pro, but conceivably it could be. And so this is a small-ish computer, but it is a 5-head and it is taller than Mac Mini. I think a single M1 Max in there, even overclocked, there's going to be cooling to spare. Like they emphasize how quiet it is and so on and so forth. But just remember, an M1 Max fits in a laptop, and now it's in a case that's not only bigger than a laptop, but it's way bigger than a laptop. There's so much room in there for the fans and the blowers and the heat sinks. I think if you get an M1 Max version of a Mac Studio, it will essentially be silent. Like I don't see why it wouldn't be, because it is just over provisioned for cooling. Because it's got to have in that same size case, they have to be able to cool twice as much CPU heat or system on a chip heat, because the Ultra is 2x that.
Yeah, I mean, I would even say like the Ultra with its better heatsink might even be quieter under moderate loads. Obviously the Ultra will be able to go higher and generate more heat, so that the ceiling of how loud the Ultra can get is probably higher than the ceiling of the Max, but it might even be quieter. I mean, but I loved when they briefly showed like the cutaway diagram of this case, and they were showing the big blower fans, and you could see like about half of the height of the case is just those big fans.
More than half.
Yeah, it's a huge proportion of the height is just cooling. That's amazing.
They do not want to be painted into a thermal corner ever, ever, ever
Well,
again.
I mean, but it is, speaking of thermal corners, though, I feel like this case design, it's a little bit odd in terms of, a lot of people are comparing it like, oh, it's like the G4 Cube. Oh, no, actually, it's like the trash can. But both of those two computers had a more straightforward and sensible cooling strategy, which was cold air in the bottom, hot air out the top. This one does not do that. There are no holes in the top of this computer. It's like a Mac Mini up top there, right? It's a single piece of aluminum, right? So this does cool air from the bottom, hot air out the back, which is not bad.
I mean, at least you can't put a piece of paper on top to make it shut down.
Yeah. It's fine. Like, I'm sure it's fine. I'm not saying this is bad cooling, but like part of the trash can design, it was just like totally embraced the idea. Hot air rises, cool air comes in the bottom of this thing, and it vents out. That's why it looks like a trash can, right? And so it was, and the Cube embraced it in a different way by not having any fans and using convection, which maybe wasn't the best idea, but still, it made sense. And this one makes like the weird fan designs that are in there are because they do want to do sort of the right angle thing. I'm going to, cool. And they could have done what the Mac Pro does. Cool air in the front, hot air out the back. Also very common, used in server racks all the time. You get the hot aisle and the cool aisle, just like the Mac DLT, right? But they didn't do that either. So it's cool.
Done.
It's
well
cool. I
done.
love the Mac DLT. I know it was lots of styrofoam. It was a very wasteful product, but I really liked it when I was a kid.
Oh my God.
Cool air in the bottom, hot air out the back. And that seems like it's kind of to serve, well, it's practicality, because then you can put things on top of this, although don't put any chocolate on top. I think it might melt. Just harder to block the vents because the back's going to have the cable, so you can't push anything up against it, and you can't really block the bottom unless it's on a shag carpet or something. But if they had done cool air in the front, hot air out the back, it could have been more efficient cooling. If they had done cool air in the bottom, hot air out the top, it would be more efficient in cooling. But for whatever reason, this is what they went with. And again, if it was aesthetically beautiful to my eyes, I'd be more willing to forgive it. But now I think it's homely, and also it has a slightly awkward cooling thing that, it's probably not going to make a difference. Again, especially with just an M1 Max in there, it's going to be so silent. And to Marco's point, if you provision it with twice the cooling for the M1 Ultra, but then you don't stress the Ultra, that might even be quieter. So I don't fear that these are going to be noisy machines, but it is interesting to note what they've done. And also the stylistic choice to make very, very tiny holes, right? It's kind of it's the opposite of the Mac Pro. Instead of these huge, giant 3D holes, these very, very tiny holes. Lots and lots of it. They think it's like 2,000 of them or something, which is interesting, but cat hair, dander, dust, like the smaller the holes, the more it could potentially clog. So fingers crossed that this cooling setup, this slightly unorthodox cooling setup, doesn't cause any problems.
Yeah, I was actually a little bit concerned that, like, because the intake is right up against the desk surface and it has all these little tiny holes, like, I do think dust down there is going to be a little bit of a thing, but probably not enough to matter.
Yeah, don't put it on a carpet, please.
Well, yeah, obviously. Or a cat.
Yeah, and then they did the M1 Ultra benchmarks, and of course in the M1 Ultra benchmarks in the GPU, it scales essentially linearly because it's an embarrassingly parallel problem. So you just take M1 Max numbers and you multiply them by 2, and that is real. That's not like a fake thing. And CPUs, it'll scale with your load. You've got twice as many of each kind of core, and if you have a workload that can actually parallelize across them, it will take advantage of them. If you don't, it absolutely will not. So be aware of what your workloads are and whether you can actually take advantage of that number of cores. And of course, because they've got the 2 of them there, the bandwidth doubles is like 800 gigs a second or something on the M1 Ultra instead of 400 on the Max, because it's 2 of them. Hey, makes sense. They brag about their 8K ProRes because they have like dedicated hardware for ProRes video on the M1 Max, and now they've got twice as much. So this thing can do 18 streams of 8K ProRes 422 video, which no other machine can do. That's, but what we talked about this with the MacBook Pros, like that Apple designs its chips to do the jobs that it thinks people want to do with its computers, which unfortunately for some of us is not play games or, many of the other applications we might want to use GPU for, but for Apple's customers, it's doing video work, it's doing machine learning with a neural engine and all that stuff, and that's where these things excel, and the M1 Ultra is 2x that. In some respects, it's like boring to talk about because, what's new? It's just double the thing that we already knew about, but if you can use double the thing we already knew about, this is like having two computers in one. So, you can get your job done twice as fast because now you've got 2x as much stuff. That's great. Marco touched on this before, but let's just put a pin in this. The XMac angle. What the heck is the XMac? Way back in the day, back in 2005-ish, I wrote an article. And when I wrote this article in 2005 at Ars Technica, it was already an old thing. So the XMac, as far as I was able to determine in 2005, and I'm certainly not going to do any better today, was a term that we came up with, and I say we because I was there too, in the Ars Technica forums. They used to have like web forums on their website. I think they still do. In the Mac section, and we would just argue with each other about Mac stuff and yell at PC people and stuff. And we would talk about the idea of an XMac. For this article, I tried to find out where this term came from. I found the oldest post in the forum that referenced XMac, but it was already using the term like we all knew what it was. So it didn't help. But I think I am as well positioned as anybody on the entire planet to tell you what the definition of XMac is at this point, because we're all old and none of us really remember, and I couldn't figure out back then. And by the way, no one corrected me and gave feedback and said, oh, I know where it came from. None of us remember. It's lost to the mists of time. Or as they would say in the Lord of the Rings movie only, I believe, none now live who remember it. The XMac is a Mac that people who hang out at Ars Technica would like to buy because it lets them configure and upgrade the parts that they care about, right? And it's, so it's like, it's not a Mac Pro because that would let everyone do that, but who has Mac Pro money, right? Right? It's not a Mac Pro, but it's also not something that's completely unupgradable or a consumer thing or whatever. It's something in the middle. And what did people back then care about? I want to get a Mac where I can, change the RAM, upgrade the storage, maybe even change the CPU, right? And the Apple would say, we've got one of those. Look, here it is. It's a Power Mac. It's a Mac Pro. It's a whatever. We have this. Like, no, but I don't want to pay $1 bazillion, and I don't need it to be gigantic. I just want a desktop Mac, no screen built in, and I want to be able to do those things with it. Like just basically a tech enthusiast computer, right? Not a professional giant workstation thing, not an iMac where everything's all built in, not an Xserve and a server rack. Just make me an XMac. That's what the XMac was. That's what everybody wanted. It was a product like that. When the Mac Mini came out, there was much debate. Is the Mac Mini the XMac? And based on that definition I gave you, I think you can say that not really. Like, it was a Mac without a screen that was lower priced, and you could upgrade back in the day the RAM on it and the storage. But that's about it. There was no GPU to speak of at all, especially back in the early days of the Mac Mini with the, Intel integrated graphics and crap like that. You couldn't add a better GPU before the days of eGPU. And it was just a little bit too small, right? It was like, well, it's not really the XMax, but it's better than nothing. And it certainly is inexpensive. The first one was like $500 or something. Those days are long gone, right? So there was the need for the XMac was still there. Is the Mac Studio the XMac? Well, here's the funny thing. If you have this thing like the XMac that has been circulating in a community for 10, 15 years as an object of obsession, Apple never seems to make the computer that me, the weird tech nerd, wants. They just won't make a product for me. And you'd say, I know I'm not a big market, but like tech nerds want what they want. They were just so excited for Apple to make that. If you have that in your mind for so long, eventually the world moves on. This is getting to what Marco was saying before. At this point, it's not that like, oh, Apple's never going to make this for us, or they keep, cruelly keeping it from us. At this point, the fact that we can't have upgradable RAM, for example, in any of the Macs that we're talking about, any of the ARM backs, right? We get huge benefit for that. Apple's not doing it just to be mean. Not being able to upgrade the RAM is bad. That's the con. On the pro side, the memory is really, really fast and makes everything faster, right? And huge memory bandwidth, low memory latency It makes the computers better. It's lower power in the laptops, right? It is less configurable. It is less flexible. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about configuring the Mac Studio. It has cons, but it also has pros. What about the GPU? Oh, certainly in this Mac Studio size box, they could probably fit a half-size GPU in there or have an upgradable card. No, the GPU is integrated into the system on a chip. Well, that's terrible. Integrated graphics suck, right? I want an XMac. I want to be able to buy an NVIDIA GPU and stick it in there. I'm not saying the world has totally moved on from that, but in many ways, Apple, didn't give that to us. Con, you can't change your GPU, upgrade your GPU. Pro, the GPUs are really fast and low power. Amazing performance without huge amounts of fan noise. And that doesn't just benefit laptops because it lets you put tons and tons of cores into small desktops like this without having them sound like hair dryers, right? It may be that the time of the XMac is moving, we've moved past the time of the XMac, that it should no longer be an object of desire as I've defined it, because the ability to upgrade your CPU, GPU, storage, and stuff like that, you're basically describing a tower computer. And Apple makes one of those. And yes, it's $1 hojillion, right? And we're back to the whole thing of but that's what Apple makes. Apple is never going to make you a cheap PC, right? There was a window of time where Apple could have made a small computer with one PCI slot or one AGP slot or one whatever slot with a video card and a good CPU. Yeah. There was a time when Apple could have made that computer. It would have had upgradable storage. It would have had upgradable RAM. It could have even had upgradable CPU, and you could put the GPU that you wanted into it. And it would be half the size of a Mac Pro, and it would have cost less than a Mac Pro. But I feel like the window is rapidly closing on that machine even making sense for Apple, because the way Apple is building Macs precludes a lot of the things that we said we wanted to be able to upgrade. And it gets rid of them not punitively, it gets rid of them in exchange for benefits that even tech nerds will appreciate. Marco is appreciating the fact that his computer is fast and silent. It's not just silent, but dog slow, right? It's silent and also very fast. It's faster than his old noisier computer. No, he can't upgrade these things in it. He can't do tech nerdy things or whatever, but I think the window is rapidly closing on the XMac. I'm not going to have a funeral for the XMac. In theory, Apple could have still made one, but I feel like the way Apple has decided to build future Macs really closes the door on the XMac. And I'm not really sad to see it go. There, again, caveats. We'll get to the configuration part of it, because I think the benefits we're getting from it are worth it. And you don't want to get stuck in the idea of if a car doesn't have a carburetor, it's not a real car. You have to embrace the march of technology. And the march of technology is that the advantages offered by a system on a chip are so huge for almost everything that anybody does with a Mac computer that there's no reason to hold on to the past. You didn't say a computer has to have a separate CPU, a separate North bridge and a South bridge, and separate PCI slots and Thunderbolt controllers. And that was the way we used to build computers, but things get consolidated. And I think the way Macs are built now and the way modern PCs are built is better than the old ways in enough ways for it to be worthwhile, at least for me. So is the Mac Studio an XMac? No, it is not. But I think it's the way things are going, and I think it is better for most people who want an XMac. It is mostly better. But now we have to start talking about the bad news and start talking about pricing. I know Marco was
honestly, I don't think it's that bad.
So you went through the pricing before and how it seems reasonable, right? But Apple is really embracing its role as the Porsche of computing, right? Because the base models are all pretty reasonable, right? But when you start doing options, and we moan about this all the time, but it's really hammering it home with the Mac Studio, especially as it relates to the 27-inch iMac, which we'll talk more about in a bit. The options really, really do hurt on this thing. So let's look at the CPU options. The base one is 24 core, so you get an M1 Max with a bunch of stuff broken in it. What's the M1 Pro?
The Pro, I think it's same
16.
Is it the same CPU cores, or is it you actually lose that as well?
I can't keep it straight.
Yeah, we can't keep there's too many numbers because they list the neural engine cores, and you have to look. It's just always 16 per, right? It's 16 anyway. The base one is 10 core CPU, 24 core GPU. So stuff is broken in the GPU, but I think that's all the CPU cores working.
Yes,
right. 8 and 2, yeah.
Yeah, it's always the same CPU cores, but the GPU cores are variable.
Yeah. And so if you want to bump that up to an M1 Max with nothing broken in it, 10 core CPU, 32 core GPU is $200. You're like, all right, that's not bad or whatever. You want to go to the Ultra, it's plus $1,400. Now, you're getting two of them, right? So it makes some sense, right? But still, that one really hurts, right? Because we know, like we talked about, it's like the system on a chip, they're expensive, but they're not $1,400 each. They're just not. Like, they don't cost Apple $800 to build either. They absolutely don't, right? It's just, that's a lot of money. And that's the one.
Just to be fair, there is going to be additional cost in all the other stuff around it. You know, you have all the different other parts that are required to have two dies. You have the interconnect. You have to have two dies that both have the interconnect part of their silicon working. There is a lot of other stuff that makes it, probably not $1,400 expensive.
I think it's big margins in that.
Maybe 50%. But at this point, I think that's, given what it is and how specialized it is, I think that's fair.
And that's the one with the 48-core GPU. So still, you got a bunch of GPU cores broken. And then when you upgrade to the one without the GPU cores, this really hurts. An extra 1,000 to go from 48 to 64 GPU cores, that's just really gouging the people who want the best of the best, right? Because that's the same chip,
that's fair.
But now all the parts work. Extra 1,000. So that hurt. But whatever, that's the top end. All right, RAM. This is one of the big cons of the system on a chip thing. You get massive, super fast RAM that's shared between CPU and GPU, which again has pros and cons. Con, you don't get your separate pools, you have to have less of it. Pro, it's way faster for the CPU and GPU to interoperate, which is important for a lot of Apple's applications, right? But the other bad thing about this is that obviously the RAM is unchangeable. It's also tied to your CPU choice. So you can't get a Mac Studio with the cheap CPU and max RAM. You just can't, because the base is 32. If you want to go to 64, it's plus $400, which seems a little bit obscene, but whatever. If you want to go to 128, it's plus $1,200, which really hurts. But by the way, you have to get one of the Ultras, because if you look at where the RAM is, it's around basically the Jade C dies. And the only way to get 128 is to get two Jade C dies, each of which has 64 around it, for a total of 128. So you lose flexibility due to their system design. You can't get, I just want lots of RAM for my applications, but I don't need tons of cores. It's just not possible anymore. And that RAM costs a lot. Because like, in what universe is going from 32 gigs of RAM to 128, adding $1,200. Granted, this is fancy RAM. Like, it's not regular RAM, it's fancy RAM, it's fused to the thing. But it just really starts to hurt you on the price. And then storage, this I think is the most objectionable, because it has nothing to do with any particular advantage that Apple has. Like, this is not all the system on chip stuff. That's all Apple magic. We love it. It's awesome. It's great. It makes fast stuff. It's low power, right? Their storage is just storage. They're just buying it from a third party. Their storage controllers are probably great, but this is just flash storage. The base is 512, which is, all right, fine. Terabyte is plus 200, which you could probably get a terabyte flash drive straight out for $200. Not going from 512 to a terabyte.
I mean, in all fairness, that's worse flash when you do that.
It depends. Like, we'll have to see what the speeds are. Anyway, going up to 2 terabytes, it's plus $600. Like, it goes the opposite the way you would think. Like, you get economies of scale. No, it's 4 terabyte plus 1,200 still plus 1,200 for the 4 terabyte. You're just talking about how much it used to be. It used to be more than that. But that really hurts. And then 8 terabyte, obviously, plus 2,400. Like, those prices are not connected with reality. Like, you could look at the vendor that Apple is using for their flash and see what the real prices are. And just the margins as you go up in the options things really kick. At least the storage is not tied to the CPU, because it doesn't have to be. So again, Apple's not doing this to be punitive. It's part of the system design, but it is a downside of this. So, and I would say most of this doesn't matter that much, because that's how they're all priced. Look at the Mac Pro prices. It's the same way, right? These are the high-end computers. But where I think it hurts is because of the 27-inch iMac going away. I spent the whole last show saying, when the new big iMac comes out, I'm going to get that for my wife, right? Hey, no new big iMac, right? Surprise. At least not yet. But now, given these prices, what Casey was just talking about, of like, if I buy a Mac Studio plus the display, here's what the price is, and that's less than what my iMac Pro was, but it is not less than what a 27-inch iMac
No,
is. So,
certainly not.
Dan Moran beat me to the punch with this, and he's a fast writer. He's got an article on 6 Colors about the missing mid-range Mac desktop. If you do the price range of Apple's desktop line, there is a hole in the middle between essentially the Mac Mini and the Mac Studio, because the cheapest Mac Studio is like, there's a gap where basically the 27-inch iMac should be. Just in terms of pricing, forget about like built-in screen, not built-in screen or whatever. It's not a big gap, and you could argue Apple doesn't need to fill that gap, but I feel like there's an obvious 27-inch iMac that can go there. And the good thing that the Mac Studio does is it makes it so the 27-inch iMac can go there. It can be straight up a 24-inch iMac with a 27-inch screen. Like, don't even change the internals, right? Because if you want an all-in-one computer, and you want it at the price that's going to fit between those two items, like the Mac Studio lets you say, oh, but I want something faster. Well, great, Apple makes that for you, but I don't want a big Mac Pro. Well, great, Apple makes that for you. It's the Mac Studio. It's right there. Like, I don't even think they need to make like an iMac Pro or a thicker, faster 27-inch iMac with a M1 Ultra in it. You could just straight up take the 24-inch iMac, colors and all, everything about it, scale that sucker up to 27-inch, slot it right into there. You could also do many variations of having, an M1 Max inside it, or not having it be in colors and calling it the iMac Pro. And Apple may still do that. A lot of people were getting hung up on the idea of, like, at the end of the thing where they said, what did they say? I got the quote in here. Making our transition nearly complete with just one more product to go, Mac Pro, but that's for another day, right? But that doesn't preclude a 27-inch iMac at all, because they've already transitioned the iMac to ARM.
I think it does.
They just didn't make a 27-inch version. So the door is absolutely open for a 27-inch computer. And the reason I think they need something to go in there is because as you start speccing out the Mac Studio to be kind of the way you want it, it's clear that this is a product for people who really do need the extra power offered by it. Whereas if all you want is a 27-inch, a 5K display, but you need a little bit more than the Mac Mini, you're kind of stuck.
So just make a beefier Mac Mini. Problem solved.
They could, but they didn't do that either. I mean,
Not
this is
yet.
not a beefier Mac
Not
Mini.
yet.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there was already a rumor today from Gurman about how like they are apparently working on a Mac Mini update using I think the M2 was the current rumor now. Mm-hmm. It seems like the rumors are now kind of converging on there being a collection of M2 Macs coming out like between June and fall, something in that range.
It's true. I mean, the M2 MacBook Air is in there, and once you've got that M2 chip, that should spread to all the places the M1 was, right?
Right. And if you look, performance-wise, the M1 is totally fine for both low-end and for mid-range needs. I mean, again, I used M1s full-time for a lot of this past, time. And
the RAM limits on the
exactly.
M1, though, I think that's where it really hurts you. And
yes.
So, to some degree, it's tied to the system on a chip, but in other ways, it's not. Like, there's no reason you couldn't make an M1 with more RAM. They just haven't.
Right. Well, and I mean, maybe it's just, the however they spec the M1, however they pair it.
Like M2 wise, like, it's not like there's not enough circuitry on the chip to address more memory or something like that. Like, when they make the M2, they could make a different choice.
Right. M1's limited to 16 gigs, and I don't think you need to go to like 64, 128. I think 32 would be fine. Like, for all these mid-range needs, 32 would be a totally fine RAM ceiling. But I think the 27-inch iMac is dead, and I don't think it's coming back. And agreed. So here's why. So
I would almost put money on this thing coming back. At some
great.
point. I mean,
how much?
Maybe like probably $1.
Okay, you got
maybe
it.
Maybe not this year, but I feel like it's untenable for. Put it this way: it's untenable for Apple to keep the iMac at 24-inch for much longer. Like I understand why they made it this way, because 24 inch is actually. I've said this before about my sister, how we were trying to get her a new computer, and she was viscerally repelled by the idea of a screen as big as 27 inches, because people don't want something dominating their household in that way, which is why I think the 24-inch iMac is so great, because it's a nice big screen, but also it does not dominate your desk. Like, it tries to be like unobtrusive, but technology marches on. I mean, the original iMac had a 15-inch screen, and it didn't stay that way forever. Eventually, the iMac screen is going to be larger than 24 inches, and when it does, the 27-inch iMac will come back. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying like that tomorrow there's going to be a 27-inch iMac despite this hole in the lineup or whatever. It's just the 24, like, it went up from 21. The low-end iMac used to be 21, so they made 24, which is a nice in-between size and keep it. But eventually, 2 or 3 years from now, they're going to be like, 24, really? Everyone else is so much bigger, and they'll work their way back up to 27 and 5K.
You really just infinite timescaled us on this?
It's not infinite.
Totally infinite timescaled us.
I'm going to say within 3 years, there'll be a 27-inch iMac.
You really just finite timescaled us on this?
All right, that's the bet. 3 years from now, we'll bet it. I'll bet you $1.
My $1 bet.
Yes, I don't think it's coming back, because first of all, the hole in the lineup, it is there, but it's largely only there because the 24-inch iMac starts out so low spec. Again, if you spec things up, you actually can't spec up the 24-inch iMac to be anywhere near the base model Mac Studio, with the display. Like it's pretty far from the RAM.
Yeah, I mean,
you know,
CPU, RAM, GPU, everything about it can't get close to the base Mac Studio.
Right. If you get as close as you can, which you still only have half the RAM, and of course the very different processor, it's $2,000 almost. Like for the 24-inch iMac.
Well, I mean, that's what I say with the space in the line. Whenever you do space in the line, you can't look at the options because options destroy, like Porsche, options destroy any semblance of market segmentation because you can take the lowliest thing and then add all the options. You're like, what the hell happened? I'm going to buy a 24-inch iMac for how much money? I mean, in some ways, it's a blessing you can't add RAM to them because it keeps the price down.
We don't know how big the market for the 27-inch iMac in 2022 really is. I'm sure Apple has lots of sales data to suggest what they should do with this, but I think what Apple has done here, which probably reflects the market for large desktops with high performance stuff in them is probably very small, and that market probably tends towards people who can afford and who want higher end gear. Now, that isn't everyone. There's the whole XMac crowd, which, as which you mentioned, the XMac crowd is largely like computer nerds like us who know how to build our own computers and maybe have done that in the past or currently, or maybe it's gamers who want to be able to put in gaming hardware and stuff like that. Like these markets exist, but I think the market for people who are buying Macs to do that, first of all, and then secondly, people who want to buy a large desktop display and a large desktop, computer in 2022, I think that's mostly first of all, I think it's a very small market. And I think it's mostly a pro market. Or it's the PC people who Apple's never going to win over anyway and who wouldn't want modern Macs to begin with because they can't play any of these games anymore.
But the problem Apple has is that they sold a lot of 27-inch iMacs. Now, I don't know how many they sold, only Apple knows, but that's their biggest problem is that this was a product in their lineup. They sold it to a lot of people, and those people, forget about anyone else that you're ever attracting to the market, those people have a difficult choice ahead of them because their choices go up market and spend a lot more money or go down in screen size to the 24. Now, maybe Apple is correctly calculating, like I said, that more people are like my sister and really don't want that 27-inch thing dominating their space, and the 24 that's like very thin and it comes in pretty colors. They'll take that and they won't even notice the screen is smaller. But I have a hard time believing that. I know a lot of people who really love their 27-inch iMacs. Those are existing customers. Someday their computers will get old. They'll want to replace them, and I feel like that's the part where the hole in the lineup will hurt Apple the most. Existing 27-inch iMac customers. I mean, we're replacing, potentially, no spoilers, a 2015 27-inch iMac, right? It's not just like how many they sold last year. These things last for a really long time because your needs aren't demanding. And it's just the screen size, right? That's all it comes down to. It's not as if people are saying, oh, I need something faster or whatever. They just say, really, the only way I can get a screen that's even just... people expect technology to march on, that the screens get bigger or have better color or have HDR or have high refresh. You say, really? Just to match the screen that I've had since 2015, I have to spend how much more money for this Mac Studio thing that I don't even want and that I think is ugly, right? That's their problem, is they sold a lot of 27-inch iMacs. So I think they will address that problem eventually, hopefully within the next 3 years.
The new 27-inch iMac is a studio display and either a Mac Mini or a Mac Studio. Like that's what they want people to do. And I can tell you, as somebody who has owned many 27-inch iMacs, I think this is the way to go.
But it's better for us, but it's not better for people who don't care about computers. They just want a big screen and they want it to be an all-in-one. They do not want more boxes and wires.
I'm not so convinced you're right.
I think a lot of those people would go with either, first of all, a laptop, which is the real answer for most people, but they're going to go for the 24-inch iMac.
But they have they have an existing 27-inch thing. It's an all-in-one computer with very few cables with a 27-inch screen. And they don't want to get a smaller screen, but they don't want a separate box with a bunch of wires because they don't care about that stuff. Like it is a problem.
So wait, these people don't care about computers, except they really care about the size of their screen.
You know what it's like when you get, this is the reason why we don't want to go. It's the reason why Marco and I are spoiled now with our 6K. It's the reason why you don't want to go back to 4K screens, because once you get used to a bigger screen, you get used to it. And it seemed like technology with everything, our televisions, the displays inside our cars, and yes, our computer monitors, they just get bigger over time, and we consider that the mark of progress because we use the space up to a limit, obviously. But I feel like 27 is not over that line. So many people have been used to that space, and if you get a computer where the screen is smaller, it's going to feel like somewhat of a downgrade. Now, again, Apple may be right that it'll feel like a downgrade, but people will get over it because they come in colors. That's powerful. I'm not discounting that. I'm not saying that as a joke. That is a real thing.
Yes.
And those computers are even slimmer, which I think is something that people look for. The same reason they don't want a Mac Mini with a monitor is because they don't want more crap on their desk. They like the fact that the iMac is just one thing, and the new iMac is even less of a thing. It's so thin, and it comes in colors, and it looks nice. And like, it's not a big miscalculation. It's not a big miss. But I feel like it's something that Apple should address either by just taking the iMac 24-inch and replacing it with a 27-inch of the exact same computer, like not adding it, not having a 24 and a 27, because I agree, having a 24 and 27 seems weird, but I feel like people who are used to 27 inches aren't going to want to downgrade, and they shouldn't have to. And they shouldn't also have to suddenly become a computer nerd and have a bunch of boxes with wires.
As someone who has owned many 27-inch iMacs, the problem I always had, and I got the opportunity. I ran into Craig Federighi at an event at WWDC a few years back, and it was right around the time I was complaining a lot about the display and Mac Pro situation. Who knew?
Did he tell you to drive it over to his house?
and we got to talking. You know, he knew that I was, you know, very vocal about my opinions on such things, and I forget the full context of it. But the one thing I told him was, like, the one thing I don't like about this setup is that the monitor and the computer are glued together. And so when I have a problem with either the computer or the monitor, I have to lose them both. Whether that's sending them in for service or eventually replacing them, you have these things that are bonded together. Now, the iMac, you know, display panel, like that 27-inch panel, that it seems to be very similar or the same as the Studio Display panel that they're releasing, like, that monitor can last through many computer generations worth of hardware for a person. Like, as long as the monitor doesn't break, and they tend to last a pretty long time with, you know, no moving parts and stuff, they tend to be pretty long lasting. And so to be able to just have a monitor that you buy once, and then you have different computer guts that you can have on a totally separate schedule, and then you have redundancy or easier service mechanics, like, that to me is great. I have had to sell or decommission so many perfectly good monitors because the computer in them had broken, or vice versa. many monitors some monitors had problems that I had to get rid of the iMac because the monitor had problems. And whereas this, if you configure the base model Mac Mini, the M1 base model Mac Mini, that's 8 gigs, 512 gigs, M1. That's a great computer for so many needs. That plus the new Studio Display is $2,500. That's your new 27-inch iMac.
That's still more than the 27-inch iMac, and it's a separate box. Like, what you're arguing for is obviously, like, we computer nerds, no, of course don't put the monitor with the computer, because you need to be able to service them and upgrade them separately, and that's totally a computer nerd thing. The way regular people deal with the fact that you've got this monitor and the computer becomes obsolete is they don't care. Like, I have a 7-year-old iMac back there, and it's like, oh, but then this monitor should be able to use it across multiple generations. They do use them across multiple generations. They never upgrade. They take a 2015 5K iMac and they just use it. They're going to use it for 12 years because it's fine for them. Because what they want, that's why Apple still sells the iMac. That some people don't care about upgrading components separately, don't care about servicing them, they don't care about wedging them together for reliability, they don't care about e-waste, they don't care. Most people just want, like, if they want a desktop computer at all, which is rare to begin with, but if they want that, they probably want a big screen, and they just sit it there and they use it until something goes wrong with it that makes them have to get another one. They're not listening to this podcast and they don't care about the separate stuff.
See,
like, obviously,
you're showing off your history with Apple computers, because I can't think of anyone who has an all-in-one PC.
Those all-in-one PCs suck. That's
no, but John, all people want is a one-piece solution with one cable and nothing else. Like, if that were the case, then even if all-in-one PCs were utter pieces of trash, which they were, then there would be more of them. And
but people bought tons of all-in-one PCs back when the iMac was popular. Remember when everyone was copying the iMac and making all-in-one computers? It's just that they were terrible.
The PC ones never sold. Nobody ever bought those.
But they made tons of them because they were were trying to cash
They
in.
made
on the
them.
iMac craze.
No one bought them.
Yeah, but nobody bought them.
I wouldn't look to the PC market as a reflection of what people who buy Macs want. Like I said, the Apple sells a lot of all-in-one iMacs, and they sold a lot of 27-inch ones as well.
I don't think they did sell a lot of 27-inch iMacs. Like, I'm thinking of all the people that I know that have 27-inch iMacs, and I can't think of anyone that had or has a 27-inch iMac that wasn't some sort of like creative or software professional. You know, I know like my friend Steve, who did the icon for Masquerade. He has an iMac Pro. He does design for a living.
And keep in mind too, like a huge reason to buy the iMac since like 2015 was that it was when was the Retina iMac? Was it 2014?
Somewhere around there.
15.
Yeah, 24. Yeah, so that's the last 8 years when the Retina. That was the only way to get Retina on the desktop for a very long time.
Yeah,
or I mean, more importantly, to get a bigger screen than a laptop screen, because again, people who are buying a desktop computer probably want a screen that's bigger. And you know, the third-party monitor market was terrible, but if you bought an iMac, you got a really nice screen, and by the way, a computer stuck to it as well, and it was just one thing.
Right, and now, like, I bet a lot of those 27-inch iMacs that were sold over the last 8 years, myself included, a lot of those people would have gone the separate route if the Studio Display or equivalent existed.
Yep.
Oh yeah, the computer nerds would have, but I think a lot of Photoshop people, for example, who just do art, like, you think, oh, Photoshop, that needs a high-end computer. Not these days. If you're doing 2D illustration work, a 5K iMac, you could still be using a 2015 5K iMac and using Photoshop every single day on it, and you'd be perfectly fine. And the key feature that you want for it is, I need a big screen for all my palettes and stuff, right? You don't need a pro computer. You don't need to upgrade them separately. Like, you know, again, the 24-inch iMac exists because Apple still thinks there's a market for people who want an all-in-one desktop computer with a larger screen. And all I'm saying is that does still exist, and the extra 3 inches don't invalidate that entire product.
I understand the words that are coming out of your mouth, but I'm Team Marco on this. I really don't think that the 27 will be coming back as an additional computer peer to the 24.
But that wasn't the thing. I was saying it could replace the 24 just because the screens need to get bigger.
I don't see that happening. It's too big. For a lot of the cases where you want a little cute little desktop, the 27 would be too large. Like, imagine that like on a reception desk in an office. Like, that's a lot of these are sold for places like that.
Look at the measurement though. With a thin bezel, 27-inch iMac and the current 24-inch design would probably be like half an inch bigger, half an inch wider, and half an inch taller. Like, we have to do the measurements because there are huge borders on the 5K iMac size. You forget how big they are. I was just doing the measurements for the thing we're going to get to in a second. Studio Display. It's those borders, the big black borders around the 5K iMac, they make that machine much bigger than it is, which is, again, why I think that a 24-inch iMac design with a slightly larger screen, I think will inevitably happen, and if it happens within 3 years, I get $1 from Marco.
Either way, I really think that you are dramatically overinflating the market for a 27-inch iMac. Now, in the same way that I'm pooping on you for having no facts to back up your suppositions and your theories.
Well, Apple won't give us the sales numbers. If they tell us, we could just look it up. But
I know. No, it's not your fault. For so many people, like people who genuinely don't give a crap, they'll buy the 24-inch iMac. For people that want a really nice monitor, they'll be getting something that I'm so excited to talk about. And for people who want like their own spin on things, like I know a lot of people that a lot of, nerds and PC people that don't want to talk about anything that is less than like 30 inches and about 17 feet or like 17 feet wide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's like 3 inches high and it looks like you're looking out a gun slit of like
right. No, I don't understand why people like this, but you do you.
Ultra wide, curved.
Yeah. Seriously. No, that's exactly it. And so I really, really am 150% on the same boat as Marco here. Well, the boat that's stuck in this sound or whatever it is. But no, I really think that Marco is right, and I strongly agree that I think that there could be a place for a 27-inch iMac. I'm not saying that place is gone now, but I really think that it's already mostly filled by what we've got today. And I think that once we get a slightly better equipped Mac Mini, something that can perhaps have at least 32 gigs of RAM or something along those lines, maybe with an M2, maybe just an M1 Max or an M1 Pro, whatever the permutation may be, once the Mac Mini can scale itself up just a touch, and then you've got the Studio Display, I really, truly think that is Apple's intended solution for the former 27-inch iMac buyer, or the former casual 27-inch iMac buyer.
No, look at the casual 27-inch iMac buyer wants all-in-one more than they want a big screen. That's why they're going to get the 24. The strongest argument you have is that anybody who wants a 27-inch all-in-one wants an all-in-one more than they want the power, and they're just going to go to the 24 and they'll be happy because it's colors. Like that
See, I don't know who are you talking to that insists on an all-in-one. Where are these three people?
Like all-in-ones. Like talking to people, the people who buy an iMac are attracted to the idea that there's less crap. And you're like, well, how much crap is it? The Mac Mini's tiny. It's like 3 cables. It's not a big deal. They want it to just be a thing you plop in your desk. That's the whole computer. They want it to be like on TV and movies where people think the screen is the computer. When you shoot the screen, you've killed the computer. You know that's a trope? It's a trope because that's how people think about it. They think the screen is the computer. And with the iMac, that's actually true. They don't need a little Mac Mini saucer puck thing that they don't understand attached.
See, but if people want an all-in-one computer, you know what they buy? A laptop. That's what they buy. That's what they buy, John.
People who are in the market for an iMac are already saying, I need something with a bigger screen than a laptop, right? They're already moving themselves out of that market. They're choosing to not buy a laptop. Obviously, most people buy laptops. We know that. But anyway, someone in the chat room, Mike484, I don't know if Mike484 worked at an Apple store, but says, I'm telling you guys, 2007, 2014 in the Apple store, 27-inch iMac outsold all desktops. I don't know if that's true. We actually don't know the numbers. It would help if we did, but we'll see. I mean, if you really want me an infinite timeline, I'll just go back to what I said before. Is like screen sizes tend to go up over time. So the idea that the iMac is going to stay at 24 is just as absurd as the idea that it was going to stay at 21.5. It stayed at 21.5 for a long time, much longer than my 3-year window for the bet. Granted, but it didn't stay at 21.5 forever. Eventually, the cheapest iMac became 24. And why? Because if you're going to buy an iMac, it probably means you want a bigger screen, and screen sizes go up over time, and no one's going to argue with a little bit more screen space up to a certain limit. Obviously, when we get into the 65-inch iMac, we're getting a little bit silly, but people are buying 42 and 48-inch OLED televisions to game on, so stranger things have happened.
We are sponsored this week by Hover, a great place to register your domain name for your next business or project or whatever it might be. Hover is a jumping off point for tons of entrepreneurs. They want you to start your next business with a domain name. This is where I start. Whenever I want to start a new thing, first thing I got to do is get a good name for it. And then as soon as I can think of a good name, I go to Hover and I search for a domain for it. Because Hover is a great place to search for domains. They have over 300 domain extensions to choose from, so you can probably find something you want. Like it's really hard not to. If your exact matches aren't available, they also have really good alternative suggestions that, it isn't just, somethingsite.com. Like it's smarter than that. It's better than that. And so no matter what you want to buy, Hover has a domain name for you. You have excellent technical support available if you have any questions, and their support team is only trying to help you get online, not trying to upsell you to different plans or anything like that. And Hover gives you stuff with all the purchases that you think should be there, like who is privacy protection. That way spammers don't scrape all your info and spam you. They also have a clean UI that's designed really nicely, and in this business that's not common. I can tell you it's a really nice clean UI for managing your stuff and setting stuff up and searching for new stuff. They have monthly sales on popular top level domains, so this is obviously why Hover is such a popular choice for people starting all kinds of businesses. They have best-in-class customer support, and they have all these wonderful things. If you need it, Hover has it, and it's great. This is where I start all my searches, and it's always a pleasure working with Hover. So for your next project, get your domain name and many more at hover.com/ATP. You can get a 10% discount with that referral link on all new purchases. Once again, hover.com/ATP for 10% off all new purchases. Make a name for yourself with Hover.
Can we please? Can it be my turn now, please?
Can we stop talking about displays and talk about a display?
Yes, exactly. Thank you. So, after much whining and moaning and complaining and fussing, I am happy to report that on behalf of everyone, I alone have manifested the studio display. You are welcome. What WWDC thing did we do where you two idiots made us walk out to We Are the Champions?
The Mac
It's
Pro.
not we. It's not
Pro.
we. I'm the champion, my friends.
No, you'd be the champion if you had a studio display, but you don't.
No, you would,
105K.
you would have caused this to happen if you would have bought an XDR. Then it would have been your fault that it happened.
Oh, please. After all the whining I've been doing, I'm claiming this as a personal victory. So what do we got? We got a studio display.
You're still not going to buy it.
We'll see.
You're not going to buy it.
We'll see.
All right.
We've got a studio display.
If that LG 5K stops working again, I'm not sure he can bear to send it to City of Industry for one more.
I think we saw a view of City of Industry during this presentation. We saw so many city of chip cities and cities of chips. It was ridiculous. But anyway, so we got a studio display. This was presented by Nicole Cortez. This is a 27-inch LG 5K that doesn't suck balls. That's basically the summary.
Well, and there's a few things that are important about what it's not.
Yeah, that's the most interesting thing about this.
Yeah, it doesn't support HDR, XDR, whatever. It doesn't have micro LED.
It's not high refresh rate either.
Yeah, not high refresh. It's just a 60 hertz, 27-inch, 5K good screen. It's not as good as the XDR or as big, but it also costs like a fourth as much.
And this is kind of interesting because we were talking about this before of like, well, the laptops, they have these amazing screens, 1600 nits or whatever, but of course they're laptop size. But then we were going through the whole thing of like, well, let's look at 27-inch screens that have like modern specs. And it was like, but they cost so much money. It's like, well, but maybe they're cheaper now because the laptop screens are, obviously not that expensive because the whole laptop isn't that expensive, but also they're smaller. So maybe, panel tech is caught up and will be able to put out a 27-inch monitor that has good, modern specs, but also is less than an XDR. And I still don't know whether that's a thing that's possible, but it's not a thing that Apple did. And I think when we were talking about it, we were like, but would they make a 27-inch monitor that's just the same as the 5K? Like, wouldn't they try to make it better in some way? And as far as I can tell, the answer is no. It's not better in any way that I can tell. It's P3, it's 60 hertz, it's 5K. Not that this is bad. It's a good monitor, right? And do they pass those savings on to you? Kind of.
And what's great about this is, again, it doesn't have all that latest, greatest tech. It doesn't need to. What this monitor needed to be is pretty much exactly what it is.
Yes.
They nailed exactly what they needed to ship. Because people who want this monitor and who have wanted this monitor for 8 years.
Hi.
People who want this monitor want it to be significantly less expensive than the XDR. They want it to be as similar as possible to what we've had in the aforementioned 27-inch iMac for the last 8 years. And they want it to be, good Apple stuff, all integrated, not made by stupid LG, good quality, looks nice, all that stuff. And they wanted it to be a reasonable price for what it is from Apple. And, once the rumors started up, and I think we talked about this, recently enough, my guess for what the pricing on an Apple 27-inch standalone monitor in 2022 would be, I was saying the least I expected it to be was like $1,800, and the highest plausible price that I think it might have been was $3,000. And so to come in at $1,600,
asterisk.
But you were saying that it would have some modern specs. Either it would be high refresh, or it would be HDR, or it would be mini LED, or some mixture of those, right?
Still, for today's Apple to release a standalone 5K monitor that's good, again, not super cutting edge on those fronts, but good, for $1,600 is exactly what they needed to do. And I'm so happy they did it. Look at we thought this event was going to be fairly low key. We thought it was going to, until the rumors came out right after we published our show last week, we thought this event was going to be a couple of new iPads, new iPhone SE, maybe some new watch bands.
And then the big iMac would be the star.
Even that was a maybe. And it turns out this event, settled so much old business. To have this display in the lineup and for it to be what it is and what it costs solves so many problems for so many people.
Yep.
This is so great. And to even then get the quote mini Mac Pro that we've been expected for a while, but we didn't think that the thing that was ready yet. We didn't think the mini Mac Pro or Jade 2C or 4C stuff was coming out until later this year. So to have this all come out today, I just said last week that we heard the display rumors, but they didn't seem like it was going to be ready for like, anytime soon. I was saying like 6 months to a year.
And then after we recorded, everybody said, oh, actually the monitor's ready. So yeah, we missed that one again.
But like,
excuse me, I said I thought it was going to happen. Thank you very much. And you two jerks said no way.
I mean, because we'd just been hearing the same rumors, but none of them ever had dates. It was like they're making a monitor. It's got a A series chip in it. They're making a monitor. It's like, yeah, but when? And it's like, oh, I don't know. It'll come eventually, probably. But here it is.
And it just again, this fills an 8-year hole in the lineup.
Yes, well put.
That is so great. And the fact, I mean, I'm still kind of blown away. I still almost can't believe, it's like we've been missing this for so long. Like I almost can't believe that it's here finally. That people who want a 27-inch 5K Retina display for a Mac, we actually finally have that. We actually have an external Retina display for Macs that is the right DPI, that is anywhere close to the right DPI, that is less than $6,000 with its stand. Like that's incredible. We've been missing this for so long. It's such a huge hole, and it's now filled.
What was the first Retina Mac?
The 15-inch 2012 MacBook Pro. So
it's been 10 years. Right? Because we didn't have an Apple Retina external Retina display until now. We had an LG external Retina display. There was a brief window of time when there was a Dell
XDR,
one.
Obviously, so
that doesn't count because only weirdos buy that. It doesn't count because only weirdos with too much money buy that. Hey, fellas. Anyway, this is the first time in 10 years that we've had an external Retina display by anyone other than LG, really. And this is extremely exciting. It is a little disappointing in the sense that, yes, like HDR would have been nice from any LED or so on and so forth. But the LG 5K, when it was brand new, I believe it was $1,500, wasn't it? Or thereabouts?
It was something in that ballpark.
And I waffle back and forth between an LG hater and an LG apologist, depending on the moment in which you catch me and whether or not my monitor happens to be working at that particular moment. But right now I'm on a happy swing. The LG Ultrafine 5K is a sufficient monitor. It is a ripoff at $1,300 when it's working. It's a ripoff at $1,300 or whatever it is new. It was a hilarious ripoff at $1,600 and $1,500, whatever we just said it was.
I thought it was $1,200 new, but I could be wrong.
No, now it is.
It's in shouting. It's in shouting distance of the price of this monitor, and that's the thing that really makes this monitor look good is its complete lack of competition. Because if you compare it to the LG, like the two things that Marco didn't mention that I really think put this monitor over the top: decent speakers by all accounts, which LG does not have.
Oh, so I can attest to this.
Decent speakers and a camera. That makes it a system completer for people, because who wants a monitor? But I got to buy a webcam and I got to stick it on the top, but I got to do a thing. It's like when I have a laptop, because remember, this is not like, this is the computer for the Mac Studio. This is a monitor for all the laptops. Like, it's like Mark was saying, this is not just a one single hole in the lineup. It's a huge number of holes in the lineup filled by this thing. And it lets you have like the complete experience. I don't have to add a camera. I don't have to buy external speakers. I just plug whatever my Mac is with one cable into this thing. And by the way, it's 96 watts of charging, so it'll charge everything. This is a system completer. That's what this product is. Yeah. And that's why I think the most important things it has in it are actually the speakers and the camera, because that lets you not worry about, like, it does all the things you needed to do. Like, because if you don't care about HDR, don't care about mini LED, you're probably on Zoom calls, and it's nice to have and by the way, it's a decent built-in camera. It's not like, it's a, whatever what the old one was, like the 1080p camera. It's not that. Like, it's a decent camera
with
and
center
good
stage.
Speakers. Yeah, and center stage. So I really think they nailed this product with the obvious succession of the stand, which is some weird Johnny Ive hangover that I don't quite understand, and we'll talk about in a second. But forget about that. No one's going to buy that except for dumb people like me, maybe. But yeah, this product definitely fills the role, and it does it, like, it embarrasses the LG, because, like, would you pay an extra couple $100 for Apple quality, better speakers, and a monitor? And by the way, it charges your laptop, and it's like, stop. Yes, I'll totally pay that for this product. Like,
it works.
The value
reliably.
Right.
Well, and if it doesn't work, where do you go with it? Do you have to ship it to City of friggin' Industry? No.
Poor City of Industry. It's not their fault that LG has their center there.
Still, you don't have to ship it to City of Industry. Like they didn't even have the common courtesy to be somewhere in the Midwest, like other grown-up companies. Anyway, you don't have to ship it anywhere. Generally speaking, you just take it to the local Apple store. I know some of you don't live near an Apple store. Just bear with me here. You take it to the local Apple store. For me, it's like 10 minutes down the road. Don't be creepy. And then I can get it repaired if I were to buy one, which, I mean, I don't know.
Oh, I forgot to mention the 3 mic thing. The noise, like, again, because it's like, oh, who needs the mics or whatever? Well, because the Mac Studio doesn't have a mic and the laptop mic is over there and maybe it's clamshell. Wouldn't it be great if the monitor had a mic? Yes, it does. It does all the things. Like you plug your computer in and now you have a system with a monitor that does all the monitor things that you expect a Mac monitor to do, and you don't have to worry about any other crap. So yeah, this is great.
And for anybody for whom the price of this monitor seems absurd, I bet most of those people would not be in the market for an Apple monitor at all.
Yeah. What are you cross-shopping with? Oh, this is expensive. So show me the other Retina 5K monitor that you can use. Is it the LG? Well, we've talked about that.
Right. Like if you want an inexpensive PC monitor that is totally, not the right DPI range for either Retina or non-Retina use on a Mac, there's lots of options for that for like, a few $100. Great, do that. This monitor is filling a hole in the lineup that many people have demanded, and it fills it exactly right at exactly the right price for what we expected it to be. And I'm so happy about that. Even with if I were to get this, I would be the sucker who spent the extra few $100 on the height adjustable stand, because every Apple monitor and iMac that I ever bought before, the stand was too low.
Yeah, too low.
Yeah, and this continues that trend. Mm-hmm. And so I would always have some kind of like book or some kind of big metal something or other that I would stick it on top of.
I had multiple books. I had like 2 college textbooks that I carried with me from job to job, whose sole role was to be beneath my Apple monitor to get it at the right height.
Right, exactly. And so so I would pay the extra few $100 for the tilt stand. Even that makes it a $2,000 monitor, which is still roughly what I expected this monitor to cost. I'm so happy. This finally, even though I'm not going to buy one because I have the XDR now, but and which has ruined me forever, as John mentioned earlier, because now I want 6K forever. But still, this is so great for so many people. This answers so many questions of okay, well, I want a good Mac desktop situation, but I also want a laptop. Bingo! Buy this, you're done. Most of these are probably going to be sold to people who have laptops. That's great. Oh man, so happy.
And it's like the realization of the Thunderbolt display with the weird cattail where you can charge your laptop or whatever. Technology has gotten to the point where that is all solved as well. So this is a totally solid thing. Now, this is Apple's first non-ridiculous monitor. I was going to say it's their first monitor. Again, we're ignoring the XDR because it's ridiculous. There is room for more monitors if Apple ever wanted to make them. They could make a 4K version of this for people who want to spend less money and don't want as much space. Same features, slightly lower price, make it 4K. You were saying this is too expensive or whatever. Well, get a PC 4K monitor. The problem with the PC 4K monitor is it won't have a camera, won't have decent speakers, and won't have microphones. And you're like, well, I can buy things and stick them on, and now you're screwing everything up, right? So there is a market for a 4K. And there's also a market for a more expensive version of this that has some of the modern stuff. Maybe it has HDR, maybe it has mini LED, maybe it has eye refresh. Pick whichever of those you think are important. It would obviously be more expensive, but there's a lot of room between this sucker and the XDR for you to slot in a higher end one. So Apple could, in theory, have 3 external displays. Not today, baby steps. One is good, and they picked the right one to make, because this is the one to make, 5K, right? Because if people wanted 4K, they could get that. You can get 4K, decent 4K monitors and deal with the old peripherals. But if you wanted 5K, you were screwed and you were Casey. Right? You just had to you just had to be dealing with the LG. So this was absolutely the one to make. I really do hope that they start expanding this. The one thing that gives me a little bit of pause, again, not complaining about this product. It's spec'd and priced and everything about it is right. But now that all the laptops have HDR, it kind of makes the desktop people feel like, oh, well, so if I want to look at HDR stuff, my only choice is I got to open up my laptop screen, which is amazing, or I have to get an XDR, which I'm never going to get. HDR, the more I've dealt with the XDR, the more I think, I thought it was like when I first got it, I'm like, I don't even care about the HDR. I just want a 6K screen. But at this point, like every movie I take on my phone is HDR. The photos I take on my phones are HDR. It's nice. That's why I sit in front of the computer and I go through photos and videos. I see them in HDR. Why? Because I have this stupid monitor that shows them that way. And if you have a Mac laptop, you get to see all that stuff. But if you have this thing, you won't. And I know HDR doesn't seem like a big deal, but Apple's devices are producing HDR, and most photos that most people make are going to be produced by, their phones and not by some weird camera thing. So I think HDR, if I had to pick one feature that, like, what does the version of this 2 years from now have, or what does the higher end version of this have? HDR is what I pick, not high refresh and not mini LED, because I feel like mini LED to get better blacks, blooming is a problem anyway. Don't worry about it. And high refresh, not a big deal, but we're all producing HDR content. The laptop have HDR. That is the next obvious upgrade to this monitor. I wouldn't want it to come with HDR now and be an extra $1,000. Absolutely not, right? This is the right product for, it's overdue. This is an overdue product. It's not the right time. The right time was 3 years ago, right? But it was overdue.
6 years ago.
Yeah, whatever.
I think 10, but okay, fine.
It should be what it is, but I am now counting the years. I'm not going to say counting the days. I'm counting the years for this product to get HDR, because it really deserves it. And part of it is Apple's fault for having such phenomenal laptop screens, because this really kind of like pins it in on both sides. And also, by the way, this is, always looking for reasons to make myself feel better about buying this stupid monitor. This makes me feel slightly better about the XDR, because now I'm like, you know what? I don't have to worry about the fact that it doesn't have HDR, because my stupid monitor has HDR and it only costs 5 times as much, or whatever the hell it was. Right.
No,
I co-sign on all of that. Like, I too, you heard me say it here, when I bought the XDR, I didn't care about HDR. I was only buying it because it was a good Retina large screen, and that's what I wanted. And I have since come to very much appreciate the HDR display, and exactly for the same reason. I'm not watching HDR movies like from studios and stuff or producing them for that matter on my computer. I'm viewing photos that I take on my phone and viewing videos that I shoot on my phone, and they're HDR, and it looks really cool. And it looks like I was there, which I was, but anyway. So this is why I talk unscripted for a living. But yeah, like it is really nice. However, again, yeah, totally agree. They shouldn't have added it in the 27-inch if they couldn't do it for this price yet. And they didn't, and so I assume they couldn't, and that's great. And down the road, if they get to add that at some point, that's great too. But getting this to be like in the 1600 range, that was really, really what was needed here.
You know how Apple can actually do this, like obviously not this year or whatever, but like the way that we're going to sort of solve this conundrum of, if you want a really big monitor with HDR, it costs $5,000, right? And the other choice is HDR, but on a smaller monitor. Who is it? Dell has a QD, and we talked about this in the past, Quantum Dot OLED. They have a QD OLED screen. It's not Retina resolution, I believe, but it is small-ish. I forget how big is the QD OLED Dell thing? Chat room, they'll look it up for us in a second. Maybe 30 something inches, like wide form factor or whatever.
Is it the 8K one, or that's something else?
No. But anyway, it is a computer monitor. It's made for gaming, right? It's OLED, so true blacks, better than mini LED, per pixel blacks, right? Really great color. HDR, not 1600 nits, but still HDR, more than 500 nits, and it's reasonably priced. It is, I think it's like the number starts with a 1. It's a 4-digit number starts with a 1. It's like 1300, 1500 or something or whatever. That shows that we are within shouting distance in a few years of grinding on QD OLED to be able to have a 5K QD OLED screen for not a huge amount of money. Because if they can do like whatever this resolution is now, is it $1,300? Whatever. It's a 34-inch widescreen. It's non-retina, right? For $1,300, this is Generation 1 QD OLED thing. It makes me think that the potential of a reasonably priced QD OLED, like QD OLED everywhere across all of Apple's products, but especially on the desktop, will solve this problem probably before we get to the point where mini LED HDR is affordable, that you can put it in a 5K Retina Res $1,600 display.
I'm just so happy that this thing exists. I'm so incredibly happy. The unfortunate thing about it, though, is that I already have a 5K monitor that is really not that different from this one. Well, it depends on the day.
Sell that. You can say it's refurbished.
That is true, freshly refurbished.
The USB ports are as good as they're ever going to be.
That is true.
You could use both. You could have the dual display lifestyle, which I know you love.
It's funny you bring that up because I do love the dual display lifestyle. And I like having my 2 displays, my 5K and my 4K. Marco, you said that there was no chance I paid the money for this because I'm cheap. Mm-hmm. And John, do you have a vote?
Oh, whether you already bought it?
Mm-hmm.
I so much hope that you did that I'm going to say yes, you did.
So I hemmed and hawed because why would I pay $1,600 especially as much as $2,000 for a monitor that is really not that different than what I have. However, I've paid the price with this LG.
You pay every day you use it.
And I pay every day I use it, and I deserve a treat. So a friend was kind enough to offer me his Apple discount, which was very cool. And so I was able to acquire one at a slightly discounted number, and it will be here in a month.
Nice. Which stand did you get?
Here's the thing with the studio display.
You didn't face mount it, did you?
So here's the thing with the studio display. I didn't know what I wanted to do because I really do like the dual monitor lifestyle. I know it's not for everyone, that's fine, but I really do like the dual monitor lifestyle. And I could swallow the $400 for the height adjustable stand. But right now I have a 2-up Visa situation on my desk that's actually working out pretty well. So I have, my 4K to the right, the 5K Ultrafine in front of me, and I actually really like this. And since I have to choose a purchase time, you cannot swap back and forth. I went with the VESA mount, and I think I'm going to be happy with that. I sure hope I am because this ship has sailed. But that's what I did. So it'll be here sometime mid-April, and what I plan to do is put the LG 4K, which, by the way, we were talking about this earlier. What are your options for a Retina display? As I've said many times, this LG 4K is a perfectly serviceable monitor if you're not snooty. And I am not terribly snooty usually.
And if you don't need it to be reliable or...
Well, no. The 4K, the LG 4K is very reliable. 4K.
Yeah.
The 4K is very reliable.
The 4K also shakes when you type, though, doesn't it?
No, that stand was better. Not stellar, but it was better. But nevertheless, it doesn't have a camera. It does have speakers, but they're utter trash. They make the ultrafine speakers, which are truly garbage, sound excellent. And so it's not a all-in-one solution, but as an accessory monitor, it's not bad. So anyways, this LG 4K will be put to the side and maybe used as like I want to work on the porch monitor because I'm turning into that guy. And then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to shimmy the 5K over to its spot, and it will be my the existing 5K to that spot, and it will be my accessory monitor, and the new studio display will be my primary monitor, and that's what I plan to do. And I am so excited, and I can't wait till mid-April.
So just talk about the Apple stand problem a little bit. I mean, if you look at it, it looks like it's similar to the XDR stand in terms of the mechanism, at least aesthetically speaking, similar kind of like rounded, thing that comes out and whatever they have inside there for counterweighting and all this other stuff. And that's that stand. Plus 400 for a stand, that's not appropriate. Apple, go to your corner. And it's not
in all fairness, that's very similar to the Pro stand that cost $1,000 by itself.
I know, but for the Pro one, everything's absurd up there. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. But this is a $1,600 monitor, an adjustable stand. Like, if you want to make it an optional extra, it shouldn't be $400 extra. And the way you do that is don't use the over-engineered one you made for the XDR. I know that probably saves you some time. Hey, we don't need to engineer it again. We've got one. But the problem is the one you engineered costs a lot of money to make, and then you need to make your margins, and then you need to make margins on top of the margins, because every time you have options, that's where you get all your margins from. And the final thing is what Marco said. This thing is too damn low. Apple's monitors are just too low. When I was looking at this, because, again, I haven't talked about what I'm buying, if anything, yet. I was waiting for big iMac. I didn't get a big iMac, but my wife does need a new computer. And I was like, what about this stand? Let me look at what the heights are on, how big is how high is her current iMac? And if I got the one that didn't have the adjustable stand, if it's just the height of her current iMac, maybe that's fine. Well, there's two problems. One, when I asked her about this, she said her current iMac, she always felt it was a little bit low. So right away I have to say, okay, well, I don't want to match the height of our iMac because she feels like that's low. I should get it higher. The problem is if you get it with the regular stand, it is even lower than basically a 5K iMac. So the non-adjustable stand is very low, kind of like it is in 24-inch iMac. It's not the height my wife prefers it. And ergonomically speaking, where they say where your eye line should be on the monitor, all those things are very low. I kind of understand why Apple errs on the side of being lower, because higher feels more awkward than lower, because looking slightly down at something is much better, Casey, than looking slightly up at them, which is why you shouldn't put your TV over the fireplace. But that's what they do. And then your only option is, adjustable stand, or you can just put books under it, because books are way cheaper than $400. Well, maybe not. Actually, maybe not the textbooks that I've been putting under it, but is another whole other issue there, right? So here are the things. The regular stand height I think this is the top of the monitor, is 18.8 inches. For $400, you get adjustable height, and the adjustable height, the minimum adjustable height is 18.8 inches. So if with the adjustable stand at its lowest position, that's how high the non-adjustable stand is. The non-adjustable one is not in the middle of the range. It's the bottom of the range, right? And the max height is 23 inches. And an iMac 27-inch is 20.5 inches, but there's that huge bezel on top of the thing. So it's really like 19.5 inches to the pixels, right? So yeah, the non-adjustable one is low. Be prepared for that. I haven't seen anyone look this up, but could you stick the monitor on top of the Mac Studio, or is the stand too big? Would it hang off the edges? I don't know the answer to that question. That might be awkward, but you can always just put books or whatever.
That also, I think that would be too high then.
Probably, but you never know. Like, anyway, I'm sure people will work something out. Apple never showed it in that arrangement. I think it would be awkward and potentially dangerous and tippy in that arrangement. It might not fit at all, but just keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is that these stands are not interchangeable according to Apple. Apple's little thing here says, note, each stand or mount adapter is built in. They are not interchangeable, so it's important to consider your workspace needs at the time of purchase. So if you buy the adjustable one and you want the regular one, or you buy the regular one, you want the adjustable one, or you want to switch to VESA, no go. Now, that's what Apple says. It could be when MacFixit gets this, they realize there's something you can swap out and do or whatever, but just keep that in mind. And that's part of the unfortunate thing of Apple's weird stand problem, is it makes you think about something that you shouldn't have to think about. If we just took it for granted that, of course, all Apple large display things for the desktop come with an adjustable stand because that's ergonomically appropriate and Apple cares about ergonomics, we should just take it for granted. And we shouldn't have to worry about how Apple figures out how to engineer it or whatever. They would engineer the over-engineered one for the 6K, and they would engineer a cheaper one for the other things. Keep in mind, they produced the iMac G4 with that amazing spring-loaded ARM thing. That was in like a $1,700 computer. The thing was freaking amazing. It had like 1,000,000 degrees of motion. You can move it with your fingertip. If they can do that, there's no reason it should be at $400 to get a slightly height adjustable display on an otherwise well-priced monitor. So I hope Apple works that out.
Yeah, I'm just so excited this exists. I'm so excited to get mine. I am overjoyed that this tremendous gaping hole in Apple's product lineup has finally been plugged. One
more thing to talk about with this product. The rumors were that it would have an A series system on a chip inside it. We were trying to figure out what the hell they would do with that. If it was a weird made up rumor, would they use the GPU to augment your GPU? Things I threw in one of our Slacks the previous days, like when you don't have a computer attached to it, it could double as an Apple TV, because why not? And it turns out they put an A13 in it, right? So the Apple TV 4K, Apple's top-end Apple TV, has an A12 in it. So this has a better system on a chip than the Apple TV. And it has a gorgeous screen attached to it. There's no reason, technically speaking, why they couldn't have just made this an Apple TV. Would that be dumb? I don't know, but it's there. But the question is, all right, so it's got an A13 in it. What the hell is the A13 doing? Well, like I was saying when everyone was spinning out the rumors of this, like, the simplest answer is probably that it runs the display. And why do they use an A-series chip for that? Because Apple's got a lot of A-series chips. Like, they can probably make A13s pretty cheaply these days. Maybe they got a bunch of them hanging around. Rather than custom designing a chip just for this display, the A13 is a fully, Turing complete tiny computer that you can make do whatever the hell you want it to do. And so I think, what is the A13 doing inside there? Well, probably mostly twiddling its thumbs, honestly. But when it's not twiddling its thumbs, it runs the camera, runs the speakers, does spatial audio stuff, like handles like the USB, like who knows? Like, it does all the things. It's, again, would Apple have created the A13 for this monitor? Hell no. But if you got the A13 already and it fits in the pricing thing, it's probably a reasonable thing to chuck in there. Now, Philippe Esposito on Twitter had this tweet, which is a potentially the grim future of this product, which he says, I guess this is what happens when you put an A13 chip in a display, and it's using PL-util to dump a plist file from, I guess, a beta version of macOS. And in the plist file, it is a name-value pair, and the name is title panic display, and the value is your display was restarted because of a problem.
Oh, no.
Yeah, when you've got a system on a chip in your display, kind of like Marco's car, you might have to reboot your display after it crashes. We hope not. And obviously there's processors inside the XDR. There's processors inside all these things. Apple didn't make a big deal of it, but this is like the most overpowered display ever shipped, because the A13, don't forget, there's GPUs in the A13, there's like the motion processor. It's not like they can make a special custom version of the A13. It's an A13. It's got an image processor. Maybe they're using that for the camera. This is the most overpowered display probably Apple has ever made. And I hope that it opens the door for them, because they fit into the price envelope of this thing, right? So the A13s are probably pretty cheap, and it's not a big chip to begin with. It's a phone chip, not a Mac chip, and all that other stuff, and it's old, right? There is the potential to do way more interesting stuff with this. Hey, maybe Face ID. Again, we didn't get Face ID. We understand Face ID is not a thing on a Mac for reasons that are frustrating to me, but again, people who repeatedly explain to me how expensive and annoying it is to deal with Face ID. I say it's on iPads. Anyway. If we get it eventually, it'll be great to be in the monitor. If we do, the A-series chip will already be in there. If they just do it as the status quo, like, it makes me wonder if the XDR replacement will also have an A-series chip in it, just because, like, that's how they're building monitors now. Fine, I'm okay with it. I just feel like there is a lot of there's a lot of potential that is not being used. It's not wasted because it's not like the price is jacked up because of the $30 A13 they had to stick inside the thing, or $15, whatever it costs them now to make. I think it's fine, but I am excited about the possibility of doing more interesting things with that. Primarily Face ID, but making it double as an Apple TV. That sounds dumb, but like, you basically get it. I guess you need storage. You get it almost for free, right? Just a streaming Apple TV. It's, I guess you need Wi-Fi at that point. I don't know. I haven't really thought it through, but anyway, there's a lot of compute in this monitor. Hopefully they'll figure out to do something with it.
Real-time follow-up from Jelly. The foot on the non-adjustable stand would fit on top of the Mac Studio. So the Mac Studio is 7.7 inches square. The foot on the non-adjustable stand is 6.6 inches. However, the adjustable stand is 8.1 inches. So womp womp.
Yeah, that's the other thing about the adjustable thing, because I'm assuming it is straight up the thing from the same sort of hinge part from the XDR's $1,000 stand. It's kind of awkwardly proportioned, because that little hinge was proportioned for this giant monitor. When you put it on a smaller monitor with a smaller foot, it kind of makes the monitor jut out more a little bit, so it's a little bit weird.
Also, the XDR can rotate, can it? And
yes.
I presume this cannot.
Yeah, this
the Visa mount allows or is able to be rotated, or you can mount it vertically, in portrait or whatever. But I would assume that the height adjustable stand, it does not let you rotate the monitor.
Yeah. And the weird thing is, like, the over-engineered hinge. Like, one of the things I complained about when I got on my XDR is that the hinge actually doesn't feel that sort of precise or smooth or expensive. It's kind of scrapey and not great. Like, it's very solid. It's not like it's shaking or anything, but it's not the premium experience you would expect from a $1,000 stand. I feel like most of the $1,000 is the fact that I'm assuming the foot for the XDR, the stand, is like machined out of a single giant block of aluminum, and that's like half the cost right there.
Yeah, probably.
And and I think that's also true, to be fair, of these ones, like the iMac foot and the non-adjustable foot. I think those are also from a solid piece of aluminum. It's just smaller. As far as I can tell. I don't know. It might be friction welded or some other crap. But this is what we miss with not having the Johnny Ive videos, where he tells us in intimate detail how they manufacture every single part of these products.
And then one final thing that Apple released is a new silver and black keyboard /mouse /trackpad, which I'm really, I think if I didn't just drop like $400 on a trackpad and keyboard, I would definitely be buying a pair of these as well. But,
now, are these the same ones that came with the Mac Pro?
No, because they have Touch ID. I was confused by this too when I was looking through the store, and I'm like, wait, aren't they always black? I'm like, I guess not, because someone posted a picture of, I think it was Merlin, sent me a picture of his like Touch ID keyboard. I'm like, white keys, what is that? And yeah, the black ones. So I have the Mac Pro one does indeed have black keys, but of course no Touch ID.
Right, but and what about the other, like the pointing devices? Are those the same as the Mac Pro, I assume?
Oh, I don't think I even unwrap that mouse. I don't deal with this. It's, if I can leave it mint in package, never having been done, I will do so. I'm pretty sure that's still in the Mac Pro box in the attic. I don't touch that crap. It's not crap. It's not the mouse that I prefer.
We've been going 2 hours and almost nearly a half. And you just brought up the Mac Pro, and this is when we heard the quote, which you had quoted earlier, making our transition nearly complete with just one more product to go, Mac Pro, but that is for another day. So they spent a lot of time during the Mac Studio portion of the presentation kind of crapping all over the Mac Pro, which made me laugh very, very hard. It made me feel very bad for you and Stephen Hackett. But nevertheless, what do you think? Oh, did you never told us if you bought anything. Is this the time to tell us if you bought anything, John?
Sure. So, again, the plan was my wife needs a new computer. She's in 2015 iMac. It's a little bit creaky. I wish it had more memory. I wish it was faster, especially because all the kids have accounts on there too. And if they're going to log into a computer, it's going to be that one. If you have all three people logged in at once, your RAM is starting to get fights over RAM. Sometimes switching users, you can see it swapping and stuff, and it makes noise sometimes. Anyway, but no big iMac, right? But I am the exact person that Marco talks about who appreciates the fact that if I can get a separate monitor and a computer, I prefer that to having it all in one. My wife, on the other hand, is not excited about having another box on her desk, even though I told her it's going to be a very small box. It's not going to be a big deal. What do you think of that? Right. So my plan was, okay, I'm not going to wait around for a bigger iMac. I like this better anyway, even if my wife will grumble a little bit about having more cables and boxes and wires. In the end, it will be good because I will upgrade the computer part of it more often than every 7 years or whatever we're doing with this iMac, right? I will do that just to sort of keep up with things. So I'm like, I should get a Mac Studio. So what I should get is obviously the cheapest CPU because I don't, she doesn't need any CPU. The M1 Max is more than enough. It's going to be so much faster than her computer. Unfortunately, one of the things I want out of it is more RAM because, again, 3 kids logged in at once and doing stuff, and the kids are launching Photoshop now because they know how that works. And, I do need more RAM, and now I've got to I can only max out at 64 because I'm not going to get the Ultra. So I guess I got to look at the M1 Max with 64. I mean, that's probably plenty, but, grumble a little bit. I don't care about the GPU. We don't do any gaming on it, but you get what you get, right? So that's how I can spec that out. Disk space. My problem before was stopping myself from spending money is I'm filling up this external disk. I need a bigger external SSD. Oh, don't buy one. Your big iMac that you buy will have 4 terabytes. So I have to go to 4 terabytes, and now I got to eat the stupid 4 terabyte price plus $1,200. Oh, screw you. But all right, fine. And then I was like halfway through configuring this, and I'm like, why am I doing this? Now that the display is out, why don't I just get a Mac Mini? And then I was reminded why I don't get a Mac Mini RAM. Mm-hmm. So I go to the studio display page, and I'm specking it out again. And so what I ended up with, we had the discussion about the adjustable height. That's how I had the thing of do you care about the adjustable height stand? And she's like, how high is it? And then she said it's too low. And so we have to get the adjustable height or we have to put a book under it. And I'm not going to make her have books underneath her computer. So we're going to get the adjustable stand. So it's studio display, adjustable stand, Mac Studio with the cheapest CPU with 64 gigs of RAM, 4 terabytes, right? But kind of like Casey, and I assume Marco, I have friends and family who work for Apple, and I wanted a friends and family discount. And my friends and family said, oh, we can't order that yet because the Mac Studio is not available for purchase under the friends and family plan yet. So here I am. I have not ordered anything. I want to order something, but I also don't want to pay a lot for this muffler. So I'm waiting for the employee, friends and family purchase, whatever, blah, blah, blah thing to make it possible for people to buy the Mac Studio. As of, I think, last night, it is still not possible to do that. So I am just patiently waiting. And by the way, the shipping dates and these things are pushing out like weeks and weeks and weeks. So who knows when I'll have it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you waiting for your discount to work is going to cost you 3 months at least.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Again, this is a 7-year-old computer, and she kept saying she doesn't need a new one, so she's not in a hurry to get it. So, I'm, unfortunately, it seems like ATP as a whole, Marco will probably beat me to buying this when he eventually caves. And
Which, by the way, and I've actually never used one of those friends and family discounts. You said that you assumed I do it. I don't. No one's ever offered.
I assume you have friends or family at Apple, and you definitely have friends at Apple who you could get the discount because that's the point of the friends and family discount. It's not like we're getting some inside deal. If you work for Apple, you have a certain amount of friends and family discounts that you can give to family, but also friends. So if you are friends with someone in Apple, they might be able to get you a discount on your computer. And when I looked at what the friends and family discount was, because you can see the prices, it's substantial. Because what they do is they cut down on the margins, and I end up buying all the stupid options that kill the margins. You're like, wow, that option for the 4 terabyte SSD is still obscene, but not as obscene. It ends up being I think on this particular computer, it's like $900 savings, right? So it is not small beans. And especially since I'm kind of honestly, for my wife, a Mac Mini and the studio display, I would get that for her if I could get it with more RAM. Because she does not need the Mac Studio.
This is what Marco and I are saying.
I don't particularly, but you can't because it's M1 and it's only 32.
Today, on an infinite time scale, John, you'll be able to.
Yeah, I bet the next Mac Mini update, I think, will close some of that gap.
Yeah. And anyway, and yes, this Mac, just to be clear for all the making fun of my 4 Mac Pro, yes, this Mac Studio, the low end Mac Studio I'm getting will probably stomp all over my Mac Pro.
Oh, totally.
But to that point, two things. One, I totally unrelated to this announcement because this was, just the thing I was doing. I was noodling around a weekend or two ago, playing with Microsoft Flight Simulator in Windows 10, in HDR, and not 6K because that's a beast of a game. That's the thing I can't do with the Mac Studio because I can't play Intel games. Right, so there's still things that my clunky old computer can do that this one can't. And on the front of the Mac, setting aside my personal stuff. One final note on the Mac Pro, so that ending thing, this is another thing I love about the new Apple. Someone said, should we mention something about the Mac Pro? And they did. They just said it. Because if they didn't, we'd spend this whole freaking show going, oh my God, is the Mac Studio the new Mac Pro? Yep. What about expandability? No, they said, and we're going to do the Mac Pro. Don't worry about it. We're still going to get to that. It's like, okay, good. Now we don't have to waste any, fretting over that. They're still going to do a monster, horrendously expensive computer that's huge and has tons of expansion. And probably, even bigger CPUs somehow that we can't figure out yet. They're still going to do that. But just looking today at the Mac Studio, what if I get a Mac spec Mac Studio? Isn't that the best computer Apple owns? When we talked about this before, the possibility of Apple doing, the Jade 4C and counting up the GPU cores, what I said was that it is plausible that a, Jade 4C type thing without amount of GPU cores can match or exceed the performance of the best video card available on a Mac today. But what I also said back then was, but if you get a Mac Pro, you can put more than just one of the best GPU available today. In fact, you can put 4 of them in there. So if you look on Apple's Mac Pro page, they will show you, hey, if you get 2 of the Radeon Pro W6800X Duos, so 2 cards with 2 GPUs on it each, you get 60 teraflops of single precision computing power on it. An M1 Ultra max spec'd up is 21 teraflops, right? So even if you double that for a double M1 Ultra or a Jade 4C, you're still at 40 teraflops. So you are not able to put as much GPU compute in the top of the line 2022 Mac Studio as you can in a 2019 Mac Pro because of the magic of expandability in third-party video cards. So it remains an open question. Well, first of all, that's why people would still buy Mac Pros, because if you really need maximum GPU for whatever the heck you're doing, you can put more of it into a Mac Pro than you can in this thing, right? And the second thing is, why are they still making the Mac Pro? Why doesn't everyone just use the Mac Studio? Seems like the answer still might be, well, the Mac Pro has card slots, and things that can go into those card slots are third-party video cards. Again, it's an open question. But the bottom line is the numbers just don't add up to a world where there is a Mac Pro shipping that is less computationally capable than one from 2019. So I have to think that when the Mac Pro comes, obviously it'll be a CPU monster. There's no, the friggin' Mac Mini is faster than this thing in CPU, right? Whenever obviously it will be a CPU monster. But GPU-wise, because the current 2019 Mac Pro, because it has all those card slots and because GPU vendors keep making new GPUs and because you keep sticking them in the card slots and there's a lot of them, you just can't match that with the GPU that's built into the system on a chip. So I don't know what Apple's going to do here. This is a real sort of decision point for them. Do they continue to pursue the Mac Pro strategy of you can have cards and stick them in there? Or do they say, we're giving up on that, and in exchange, the ceiling is going to be lowered on your GPU, but we think most of our customers don't care about that anyway. So we shall see probably December, early next year. It's hard to predict, but that's going to be exciting and or incredibly disappointing if they just put the M1 Ultra in it.
I think, I'm sure we'll talk more about this in future episodes, but I do not expect a Mac Pro with Apple Silicon and slots. I think they were pretty clear today. In all the comparisons they were doing to the Mac Pro and including GPU and CPU comparisons, there were a lot of qualifiers on those, comparing it to particular GPU configuration XYZ on the Mac Pro.
Or doing metal benchmarks instead of
right.
Picking benchmarks that are tailored to their specific hardware that they know they put in the system on a chip.
Right. They obviously they obviously cherry pick benchmarks to make them look the best, but I think a lot of what they were showing us today, the way they chose to present certain things, a lot of it was basically saying, look, you don't need the old Mac Pro anymore. Even though, you're right that the ceilings are higher on it for the expandability. The RAM ceiling is way higher. I believe it's 1.5 terabytes compared to 128 gigs. That's way higher. It obviously has higher ceilings. But what Apple is trying to push here, I think it's pretty clear that the whatever the new Mac Pro is going to be, it's probably not going to be radically different than the Mac Studio. It's probably going to be, we're seeing how they're scaling their architecture. They're scaling it by just multiplying the chip. That's what they're doing. They're taking the same system on a chip and they're multiplying it. The M1 is very similar to the M1 Pro and Max, and the M1 Pro and Max are very similar to each other. The Max is just, a longer version of it or whatever. And then the Ultra is just two Maxes stuck together. And, if the 4-die plans come together and that's what forms the Mac Pro, which I think is the most likely outcome here, then I don't think it's going to be any different than just a bigger version of the Mac Studio that has 4 of whatever the big CPU of the year is glued together and no slots. Like I this is what I've been predicting for a long time, and I think I'm sticking with this prediction. And when they make that transition, there will probably be a bit of a regression in certain maximums that are available compared to the Intel slot-based Mac Pros. But I think everybody will take that. And not everybody. I think most people will take that in exchange for the other benefits that it will provide. And I don't see them ever having third-party GPU support or slot support or any of that again. I think that's all over.
I mean, this is another area where it would help to know Apple sales numbers because, I'm sure people who are the 5 people who are listening to this are yelling like, slots aren't just for GPUs. What about audio interface cards? I have every one of the slots on my Mac Pro filled with audio interface cards, and those things are not GPUs, and you can't put them in a Mac Studio size thing. So what are we going to do? And that's to get back to the question we always get back to is like, does Apple care about that market? Do they want it? And the thing I still have trouble with is they made this big turn with the Mac Pro and said, we're going back into that market. And I just feel like even just to recoup the cost on the investment of the tooling for the Mac Pro case, they're just going to have to ship more computers in that case. And if you ship computers in that case, you can't fill that case without expansion slots. So I am still in the camp that I think there's going to be expansion slots, if only as a consequence of the decision that they did make about the Mac Pro all those years ago, right? Just to sort of see that to its logical conclusion and reap all of the money that they've already invested in this particular computer, it seems like they should at least make one more round of computers with it. But to your point, the way that Apple would pitch this is it's not about specs. Like, who cares how much RAM you have? It's about capabilities. What are you trying to do with your computer? Oh, but I'm trying to render video in Final Cut. Well, guess what? This thing renders video in Final Cut twice as fast. But how do you do it twice as fast? You have half the GPU compute and you have a quarter of the RAM. It's like, don't worry about how we do it. We're just telling you the job that you want to do, we can render it twice as fast. So now do you want to buy this? And you're like, but I want RAM. And it's like, look, do you want to render twice as fast or not? But that really depends on Apple precisely knowing what people want to do. And unfortunately for Apple, if they want to, let's say the market for audio professionals is important, and if they want to keep that market, and if that market demands a bunch of physical interface cards, and they're not going to build those physical interfaces into the computer, they're just going to lose that market. And it's just a question of which market do you want and which market do you not want, right? I feel like it would be another flip-flop betrayal for at this point to Apple say, actually, we changed our mind, no slots, right? Even though I agree that for lots of important use cases, you don't need that stuff. You don't need 1.5 terabytes of RAM. You could get away with less GPU compute because Apple knows for those specific use cases, whether it be image editing, or like machine learning, or obviously GPU video rendering, Apple can highly tune these computers to that case. But I still kind of feel like that's the Mac Studio. That's the computer that does that. And the Mac Pro is the outlet valve for letting the Mac Studio be awesome for the people who want it. And for everyone else has weird needs and is willing to pay a ridiculous amount of money, Tower Mac Pro, expansion slots, ridiculous system on a chip conglomeration thing, and also third-party video cards on top of it. I don't understand. I don't understand how that works in my mind for all the reasons we discussed in the past. How do you have even more non-uniform memory? You have 128 plus 128 plus another pool of extra RAM. Do you have the big built-in GPU, but then also the other GPU cards just use your computer? I don't understand how it works. This is in many ways way more fascinating and confusing than the original Mac Pro was, because the original, the Mac Pro, the 2019 Mac Pro, they said they were going to make a modular computer, and they straight up made a cheese grater, like just a bigger, nastier one, right? Made perfect sense. Works. Everything worked out. It's got a Xeon in it. It's got a bunch of slots. It is exactly what we hoped and thought it would be. But the ARM-based Mac Pro is just this cloud, just giant nebulous cloud of hopes and dreams and doubt and Casey annoyance. So we'll wait. I guess we could probably get at least until the end of the year to figure out what that's going to be, but I'm super excited.
Thanks to our sponsors this week, Kolide, Hover, and New Relic. And thanks to our members who support us directly. You can join at atv.fm/join. And we will talk to you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
Apple snuck in one final one. macOS 12.3 is coming out next week. Apple said in a press release. They pre-announced the product. How do you know it's coming next week? What if there's a last-minute bug? Oh no. So brave of them.
I can't believe like the way how they ended it with John Turnus basically saying there's only one more and it's the Mac Pro and it's coming.
Only one more makes sense because it had one more product. What product needs to be transitioned from Intel?
Well, but in that one sentence, he killed the 27-inch iMac. I mean,
no, because the iMac has already transitioned to ARM. iMac already did that.
All right, we'll talk about that some other time.
But here's the real problem. Why are they still selling the Intel Mac Mini?
That's a really good question.
I mean that's just weird. Like, it's still has the Mac Mini product transitioned to ARM? Yes. Just name a product. The only product left that is not transitioned is the Mac Pro. So that doesn't say anything. But I just love the fact that they said Mac Pro, because if it didn't, I'd swear this whole show would have been wiped out with me tearing my hair out over, like, is the Mac Studio the new Mac Pro? What does this mean? But Apple, I mean, again, they didn't say what the Mac Pro would be. If the Mac Pro is just a Mac Studio in space gray, then Marco was 100% right on his prediction. But still, there's going to be some product called Mac Pro, and it's going to have an ARM chip in it, and they're going to make it.
I think they're going to keep selling the Mac Mini as Intel for a while longer for the same reason they're selling the Mac Pro as Intel, because a lot of people still have like weird specialized needs that require an Intel machine or some capability.
It's like Mac Mini Colo. It's the Mac Mini Colo machine.
Probably. I mean, like I'm guessing because I mean a lot of Mac Minis are frequently used in those kind of roles. That's a critical part of what the Mac Mini needs to address. And so that actually does make sense that they would keep offering that for a while.
Oh wait, I think doesn't Amazon have, speaking of AWS, I think AWS has like an iOS server build farm thing that you can do, and I think they use Mac Minis for it.
That wouldn't surprise me. I mean, that would make sense.
I mean, that's the type of thing of like, it's kind of like the whatever those, the 101, the MacBook with the CD thing that they kept around forever for education.
Yeah, the MD 101 LLA.
Yeah, I'm wondering if like the Intel Mac Mini is the equivalent of that. There's a bunch of big customers, maybe even just Amazon, that say we're still buying Intel Mac Mini, so could you keep making it for us? Whereas no one's saying that about the 27-inch iMac.
Yeah, exactly.
You can put them in server rack. I think I've seen that. Have you ever seen? Remember we saw the trash cans in server racks, like on their side, right? So you could take anything and put it in a server rack if you try hard enough. 27-inch iMac, sure, just wedge it in there.